lines up really well with the Mana Saber, but I see the other um I see the other correlation as well. And I've also I'm kind of interested why people are still only running one or no Imprison Homunculus, because that card's also been quite good for me. So I don't know, it just fits in so easily, and like the stats on it are pretty good. I don't know, it lines up against a lot of the removal pretty well. So I'm interested why more people haven't. I'm interested why so many people are playing double Grave Rune, because that card's been okay, but never fantastic for me. It's done some goofy stuff, but never like I've never been like, oh, without this Grave Rune, I never would have won this game. So I'm kind of interested why people are so high on that card, or what matchup it's like insane in.
I feel like
I think
Grave
it's
Rune.
really fantastic with Mana Saber.
Yeah. You're talking about Grave Rune, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. What I really like about Grave Rune is the Mana Saber interaction specifically. There's also a cool list that was running around that was running Terran Gorefiend and Shadowy Figure. Shadowy Figure, for those that don't know, that's the 2-mana 2/2 priest epic that copies a friendly Death Rattle minion as a 2/2. So you can copy something that's been Grave Runed, or you can copy a Terran if you're getting real saucy. That's very unlikely to happen, but if you have layers and layers and layers of stuff inside. I do like that interaction. I do agree it feels clunky, and I do strongly agree that Imprisoned Homunculus has actually felt really good to me. And I have seen it falling out of lists, and I'm not sure why. And Vile Fiend, but you have been saying for a while that should just be in Priest in general. Aveline hit rank 1 a couple days back with regular Galacrond Priest with Imprisoned Vile Fiend. 2 copies.
Yeah, it just makes a lot of sense. It's so much better to play that card on 2 than a Thought Steal or something. It's like just incredibly better. And I think my biggest issue with Grave Ruin is actually the imprisoned minions, because the way they interact with Grave Ruin is then they're both dormant when the imprisoned minion dies, it comes back dormant, which is also why I'm a bit confused about Terran Gorfiend, because it would do the same thing. So like I like the idea of Terran Gorfiend because it feels like you're going to have minions in play to be able to Gorfiend, but at the same time, if you're gore fiending imprisoned minions, which are the ones that are most likely to be able to get gore fiend, then when they come back, it's just 2 more turns of being. And like the deck just seems like it's about board presence. Like that's what the deck is trying to do, is just create board presence. And I guess that's why Grave Ruin kind of works, but when it also doesn't interact super favorably with a quarter of your minions, I'm just not super sold on it. So I don't know. I could be wrong. I've only played 50 games this season, so it's hard to tell.
All right, we're going to try. Oh, do we have video? Something is in front of it. Oh, your camera was in front of your camera? Are you muted?
She's muted.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're muted on purpose, not muted by accident.
Correct.
Okay.
So, yeah, I think a lot of the taking Homunculus out has been like, do you want to be more teched for Demon Hunter versus do you want to be more teched for Druid? I think that was kind of the swap, was we took out Homunculus for Mind Games. And Mind Games we found is actually pretty solid just in the meta presently against Druid. Hitting Mount Seller is insane, particularly on 4. And honestly, the other dragons are just large to be playing on 4 anyways. Mage has like the Highlander decks, because they have DQA and like some of these other big dragons. There's solid hits. Of course, the high roll against Warlock is Malagos, even though you can't kill them with that. Like it still makes your Novas good for clear, etc., and your penances as well.
So is that so are you talking like about lineups then for like tournaments, or are you talking for ladder?
I mean, I used it a bit on ladder. The Mind Games tech was specifically a tournament choice,
Okay.
where
That makes a lot of sense.
the expectation was that there would be a lot more Druid. So, yep.
Yeah, okay. That I could definitely see something when you're teching for for like tournament or lineup prep. Mind games makes a lot of sense, but especially if you're still because you are probably still banning Demon Hunter with those lineups, so you don't have to keep in the homunculus against them. But I feel like on ladder there's still quite a bit of Demon Hunter, and homunculus is super super good against Demon Hunter. So
Yeah,
it's interesting. I don't know. There's a lot of options. We'll talk about it later, but I think Priest is going to be in a really good spot. But also, a reason why I'm enjoying Priest a lot right now is because it's still not very prevalent on the ladder, and I'm worried that if it gets a lot of, I don't know, if it improves too much and we start seeing a lot of Priest on ladder, I might not be too happy with the power level that it's at right now. I don't mind priest mirrors as much as other people, but I don't want to play a bunch of them. So
there's a point where something can be a reasonable power level and a poor experience, and you just don't want to do that. I don't think the meta will be defined by priest because that deck does have quite a few counters, but I don't want that to be the defining thing. And playing a bunch of mirrors, I did play a mirror today, and I did win the mirror in part because I played for tempo, and in part because I generated 5 Fate Weavers. And both were good, but 5 Fate Weavers are also good for tempo. It is also worth noting there is a Celestalon tweet that I will post in the show notes because there is some talk about it in the Twitch chat. Right now, some of the Galakron friendly cards can be generated, and some of them can't. Like, you can make Fate Weavers or Scions of Ruin, but you can't make Seal Fates or Praise Galakron, and it's a bug. But they were originally going to add Galakron-friendly cards into generation pools, and they're removing them again. They reversed that decision. So I linked the tweet. Going forward, which I think is going to be in the patch that's next Tuesday, which also will have the nerfs, but maybe in the next one, you will not be able to generate Galakron-friendly cards again. So I'll link that in the Twitch chat again. But there are some specific cards that were being generated and some that weren't, but they're just gonna walk that back. So be aware of that. But yes, this is the last weekend of it. But I will say,
interesting.
But I will say 5 generated Fate Weavers were very good in the Priest Mirror.
It wouldn't have been good in the Priest Mirror that got me to Legend, because I played a Priest Mirror and that was my final boss to Legend, and it did not last 10 turns. They died.
Yeah.
I think I went Mana Saber into double Psych Split.
I mean, you're gonna win those games
on sequential turns, and that was good enough. I think they even generated a Master Spell, and the game wasn't close.
You still had all the minions. Yeah, I was playing Aveline's List. I was playing Vile Fiend regular Galakron Priest just to try it out, because I'm playing whatever decks I can on ladder right now to feel engaged with the standard metagame because it's kind of stale right now. And the Vile Fiends were great, but my opponent died with 9 cards in hand. There were, I think, 4 total Galakrons played that game. They played a fully invoked Galakron, and then I played Mind Vision and got a fully invoked Galakron. I wasn't sure what was going on, but they ended with 10 cards in hand and 0 life, and I ended with 5 cards in hand and more life, and it just shows how the matchup plays out, that it's really just about playing your cards and not going all out for value, like Bloody Faces has talked about, like you talked about, Botticus. And I'm also at Legend. I didn't push it in Standard as much this month. I wasn't going for day 1 or day 2. I got there, I think, on the 7th or 8th or something. I played a bunch of questionable decks and had fun, but questionable win rate. Though I did have a really sweet game with Ike's Recurring Villain Paladin. I'll repeat that, with Ike's Recurring Villain Paladin. Recurring Villain, if you don't know that card, it's a 5 mana.
That is sick.
It's a 5 mana 3/6.
It initially didn't have that because he thought it rotated.
Yes. It's a 5 mana 3/6 neutral card that says Death Rattle. If this has 4 or more power, resummon it. So you put a Libram on it, and then it comes back. Now, the best game I had with this deck had nothing to do with Recurring Villain. The best game I had with this deck is I played Underbelly Angling Rod, and I attacked and I got an Underbelly Angler. And then I attacked a second time and I got an Underbelly Angler. And I went Angler, Angler, Mermy, Toxfin, your go. Next turn, Scargill, that's the Shaman 4 mana 4/4 legendary that lets all your minions be 1 mana. And I still had an Angler in the board, and so I played a bunch of stuff. Got another Toxfin, killed off their thing. Got a Felfin Navigator, which I forgot was a card that was outside of BGs. And won with Murloc. So there's still some fun to be had, but the win rate was not super high outside of that game. So I was 3 wins away because 11x is broken. So I said, all right, I'll just play some Druid. And 3 games later, I was immediately Legend. Because Druid. So, yeah. I don't think Standard is bad, but I think I'm ready for something else. It's not. I have played more unhealthy metas. I have played metas with worse play patterns. I don't even think it's really... I don't know if stale is the right word, but it's how it feels. It's just hard to engage with because we've played so much of these decks, and the nerfs have been slight nudges. The next nerfs might not be. Next nerfs might be more significant. But it's just opening up the game. I just didn't have a clear direction as to what I wanted to play. And Wild, I think I'm actually enjoying a little bit more right now, but it also has a lot of wild games, which is to say non-games. Now, there's some fun there. But one of the best decks in the format is a deck that gains 2,500 armor. And even if you're expecting it, it can be a tilting experience. And if you're playing that deck and your opponent doesn't concede, you're going to win the game, but you have to sit there for a little while. Unless your opponent is like my opponent and they're playing Reno, Shutterwalk, Control Shaman, and the turn after you gain 2,500 armor, they play a 1-mana 1/1 Plate Breaker, and then you concede the game. Wild is a silly place.
I was seriously thinking about playing some Reno Priest and just like throwing in Plate Breaker just to have an answer.
It's a thing. It's a
the
thing
one
now.
time,
Botticus, you okay, buddy?
the one time
that's
I
great.
played Linecracker Druid, I had one game where I was just like, huh, so I guess this is enough armor to win, but like, this is miserable. So I immediately threw in a Jade Idol and was like, well, at least I can do something besides hero power every turn if there's a Jade Idol, and I will win faster because I will make a bigger green man every turn.
It's if you can't remove the armor, regardless of your threats, unless they are like arbitrarily infinitely large, you will hit turn limit. It's just not enough damage. So there was a clip where Zeddy was playing. There's a new list from the China server that has become popular in the Americas, and it's very, very good. Memnarch was 26 legend with it. NHL NJ fan was 18 legend with it. It's quite good. It's a lot lower curve. It plays a lot of great cards, including Fungal Fortunes, which I guess we'll talk about in a bit too. And it's a really significant part of the meta almost overnight. And there was a clip that Zeddy posted of him and Burnt just both pressing end turn and doing no other game actions over and over again just to get to the turn limit the fastest. So, remember how we talked about nerfing not for power level but for play experience? That their thing maybe nerf that experience. So, yeah.
I mean, all they have to do is make it so something like bees doesn't trigger overkill.
Yeah,
it's gone.
And it's counterintuitive that making minions that attack your own minion would trigger overkill on that minion. It's counterintuitive. So I think that if they change that interaction, it would be overdue, is the word I'm going to use. I'm surprised it even worked that way to begin with. But either way, it's just one of many crazy combos in Wild, including a bunch of Mechathoons, including a Linecracker Druid that I beat by playing the original King Togwaggle and then a Murazon to take the deck back when they swapped. It's a silly, goofy place. So I enjoy that, but, you know, a lot of combo. So I've been playing a good bit of Hearthstone. I'm going to hit Legend and Wild at some point over the next week or two, but I am really looking forward to what is coming next week, which I think we should talk about in the news. We weren't sure what to talk about till about 1 o'clock today, Eastern Time, but now we've got a topic. Shall we?
Gadgets and Gazette always gets the scoop.
All right, so as Hat just foreshadowed, we got a big announcement today about nerfs that are coming. And yeah, we were speculating when this was going to happen, and the timing is a bit awkward, but we'll get into that. I guess we can just get into real quick. What were the nerfs? So in case you are not already aware, the nerfs that are coming on July 14th, so in 5 days, if I'm estimating that correctly, we're going to have quite a few nerfs. So Dragon Queen Alexstrasza is going to be changed, where instead of getting 0 mana dragons in hand, they will cost 1 mana. Corsair's Cache will now draw a weapon, and instead of +1/+1, it's only +1 durability. Metamorphosis will now deal 4 damage instead of 5. Kane Sunfury will now have 4 health instead of 5. Warglaze of Azzinoth will cost 6 mana. Very happy about that one. Dragoncaster is going to cost 7 mana, which is a change that they did. A Fungal Fortunes now costs 3 mana instead of 2, which is pretty huge. And Galakron the Nightmare, which would be the rogue one, now will draw 1 cost cards instead of 0 cost cards. And have a lot of thoughts about this. And I think the thing that I'm hopeful for, the most hopeful thing I am, is that these nerfs are successful in enjoyment, and that they see how they nerfed Dragon Queen Alexstrasza and Galakron the Nightmare and change all cards so that other than cards that already start at 0 mana, you cannot reduce cards to 0 mana, because I was thinking about it earlier, and I think it solves a ton of issues in the game in general. I think one of the biggest issues that it solves that would make Wicked Good very happy is that Shadow Step would not be able to be used on minions that cost 1 or 2 mana, that would not make them cost 0 mana. I think that would be a very positive change, which would also mean that they probably don't have to Hall of Fame Edwin, because shadow stepping like a 1 mana card a bunch of times in early turns, maybe you don't need to have an Edwin, that's like 14/14 that early in the game, because that's really the only way that happens, unless you there's prep shenanigans, and then you also can't prep into 0 mana cards. So I don't know that it would fix the Edwin problem, but it would solve just a ton of issues that I think just nerfing it so that all cards in general cannot reduce cards to below 1 mana would be good. Keep backstab at 0 mana, that's fine. You can keep prep at 0 mana, but make it so that it can't reduce things below 1. I don't know. I think it solves a lot of things, but there's so much to talk about with these nerfs. What do you guys think?
I think that if you've caught Edwin at the scene of so many crimes, that releasing him again and expecting it to not happen is optimistic. He's always there. He's always there.
Yeah.
But how, seriously, how often is a 6/6 or below Edwin the issue? How often is a 6/6 Edwin on turn 3 or 4 the real issue? The issue is when it's a 10/10 or a 14/14, right?
I mean,
if there's not that many, how many?
The issue is how it adds a significant amount of variance to the early game based on draw order and limits design space in a really major way, and has been in 5 of the 6 World Championship lineups since it was printed.
Yeah, but the draw orders, because you get to shadow step something that costs 1 or 2 mana and make it all of a sudden it's impossibly large to deal with, right? That's most of the problems, that's most of the issues I see with that card. And I guess I shouldn't have brought this up, because this is talking about a subject that is not really necessarily the nerfs, but it was just something I was thinking about.
I just think maybe 12/12 Edwins happen less frequently on turn 3, but I think you could still have the 8/8 Edwins on turn 2 or 3, and that's still a lot to deal with, right? You're gonna have the double backstab hands, you're gonna have the being on coin, and they may well print additional ways of getting cheap stuff, extra coins. Who's to say? Even in the mid game, having those really, really crazy Edwin turns, on 4 or 5, I think it's still going to be a problem. So I suspect they will sort of maintain kind of what they mentioned earlier, which is they want to deal with Edwin, they just haven't found a replacement legendary for it yet.
Yep, and I mean, if you put Force Roar if you put original Force of Nature Savage Roar in current standard, it would not be the most powerful thing you could do. It would be good. It would maybe be like you would put it in Spell Druid and that deck would somehow get more infuriating. But it wouldn't be the best thing you could do, but it would be a part of the format and sometimes you would just die. And Druid lost Force Roar not because Force Roar was too good, but because while that was around, you couldn't justify doing something else. And I think actually a couple of these nerfs are that too. And as long as Edwin is around, Edwin will be a build around. As long as Edwin is around, you're going to want Backstab. I mean, you're always going to want Backstab. Backstab is a crazy card. You're never going to not play Backstab. But as long as Edwin is around, you will be incentivized to put cheap things in your deck and make Edwin bigger. And the way to make Edwin worse is to stop printing cards that make Rogue feel like Rogue. And I would rather they just kick Edwin out and make Rogue stay like it's feeling like Rogue. Because all the cool Rogue things are about cheap cards and feeling clever and tricky and sneaky and all that stuff. And they could go heavier on stealth and secrets if they wanted to. And like and that's not bad. But I really like how Rogue feels. And Rogue is all about those turns where you're like, and you just do a bunch of things. And Edwin doesn't have to be the end point there. You don't even have to keep questing adventure. I got no problem. You get rid of questing adventure either. But losing that feeling to keep Edwin around and make him worse, I think would be a bigger negative than just setting Edwin loose, even though he's been doing about the same thing for 7 years now. It's so long. It's so long. And I do actually, Botticus, you play a lot of Slay the Spire. And this was brought up in our Discord earlier by who brought this up? This was, or maybe this wasn't this Discord. I was talking to someone about Slay the Spire. I forget who. Whoever it is, you should tweet at me, and then I'll remember after, and we'll shout you out. Think about the decks that you like the most when you're playing the Silent. Think about how you're building up this deck that's based on, you're kind of cheating mana and chaining through your deck, right? Like it's these really cool draw engine cards. 0 mana cards are fun. They're really fun. It's fun to do more things. So, they're dangerous. I don't mean to say they aren't. But sometimes, you just play your whole hand, and you're like, that was awesome. Now, Slay the Spire is a single-player game. Your player versus enemy. The AI does not get tilted, and is also probably cheating. Right? They're doing things that are like, you kill them and they don't die. The worst boss on level 3 in that game has a built-in ice block. Like, it's not fair. But 0 mana cards are really fun. PvE games have kind of shown us that. Dalaran Heist has shown us that. It's really tricky design space, but I don't want to lose it. I don't want to lose that. I want a card like Bogbeam. I don't want Exotic Outseller. But Bogbeam, if I can nourish for mana crystals and survive because of that Bogbeam and then do something really cool the next turn, I'm all about that. Now, if I Bogbeam and I get a Zixor, and then I Ironbark, and I get a Diving Griffin, and I go blah, 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 and play a bunch of cards, and don't lose any value because all those cards also generated extra beasts, and cleared the board and made this crazy board out of nowhere, and then next turn I just overflow and get all the cards back, I don't love that. But the idea of a card like Bogbeam, or the example I always come back to, Anubis Ath Defender, the 5 mana 3/5 taunt that if you've played a 5 mana spell it's free, or like Arcane Tyrant. 0 mana doesn't have to be overpowered. Now, it often is. It's dangerous space. Very, very dangerous space, because also you have Corridor Creeper, and you have Mogu Flesh Shaper, and you have any number of examples over Hearthstone's history. 1 mana can even be dangerous. Luna's Pocket Galaxy. Like, 1 mana did not make that card better. But I don't want them to eliminate the design space of all 0 mana things, because doing more stuff is cool. And it's a tight balance, but I hope they don't get rid of it.
Yeah, I guess we just disagree then. I think I disagree with most of what you just said. First of all, Time Eater is far and away the worst Act 3 boss, and I don't know why you think that that the Wolf is even anywhere remotely close to as bad as Time Eater.
Okay, Spire Concede, we'll talk about it. We'll talk about another episode.
And yeah, I don't know. I think the Bogbeam would be just as good as if it reduced it to a 1 mana card. I don't know. I think that 0 mana. I think that 1 mana cards are maybe not as fun as 0 mana cards, but it feels like there's a resource there. Whereas when you play a bunch of 0 mana cards, it doesn't feel like there was any resources used to. It doesn't feel like there's a whole lot of thought that goes into a 0 mana card, other than like a backstab. Whereas like I don't know, I just feel like when you're forced to pay something, even if it's really cheap, like reducing a card from 9 mana down to 1 mana, it feels like they still at least spent something to play that. Whereas when you, I don't know, when you reduce everything down to 0 mana and there's no cost at all to being able to get out something very powerful, I don't know, it just doesn't sit as well with me. So maybe I'm wrong about that, but
Well, there's no
So
wrong.
I
It's a
think
subjective
it very
experience.
much
Yeah.
right. I mean, it very much depends for me on like the type of card, right? So in the case of Dragon Queen Alexstrasza, which here got changed, um, dragons on average are quite expensive, and so having them suddenly become 0 and playable that turn is pretty gross swing turn. Here now there's a decision. If you play DQA on curve, you're not getting that huge swing right now. If you play it on 10, you at least get to play one of them. So there's kind of some interesting decisions to be made there as well. Same thing with Rogue. Now, playing your Galakron, say on 7 mana, if you somehow fully upgrade by 7, you're not going to get that huge swing right away. But if you play it later, you can play some of the 1-cost cards. But if we take everything that could be reduced to 0 and make it 1, well, now you're really killing Liberum Paladin. Because the whole reason that you wanted to reduce your Librums was like, initially I thought that the 2 more expensive Librums were like the big payoffs, but those it's just like it's nice to get them discounted. They get more playable discounted, but the real payoff is the Librum of Wisdom, because getting that down to 0 is how you can get the most like mana benefit over time, since it keeps coming back and coming back and coming back. And I think there's clever ways of playing that. There's a lot of really interesting ways of playing Librum of Wisdom, such as with Mount Seller. You cast a spell, you get a rush minion. Now you can Librum of Wisdom on the rush minion, trade it in, it dies, you get it back, you can cast again. Or just you've got a board and you need to make a lot of trades, so you attach it one at a time to like make the trades and get it back each time. So it's almost like you get a board-wide buff, but only if you're trading, right? If you are going face, this is why, like, in that deck, I try not to put my Librum on the Mount Seller, because then I can't get it back to use again. So I get where you're coming from in terms of like not wanting to have any 0 mana cards because they're too ridiculous, but I think it's gonna have to be on a case by case basis, because there's some things where I think it's fine, and as Hat said, like it's really fun, and then there's other cases where it's just like too swingy. And I think it kind of shows here as well. They didn't touch High Spare and Togwaggle because typically, or sorry, they didn't touch Wondrous Wand because typically there is already a gap between when you do it and when you play the stuff. Because like you play High Sparin, you get the wand, and you have to have like 9 mana to play the wand. So maybe somewhere down the line they'll touch the wand. It may have just been like they didn't want to hit something that like also affects treasure stuff in Wild. It's like a little weirder to hit that. But I think at least for Standard, it feels like you at least know that they have the wand before they're playing the wand, a lot of the time. So it kind of has that built-in delay. And you have to work a little harder for it.
And you have to play Paladin to be Librum of Wisdom. So, like, that's already a huge downside.
Right. Right now, once we get a new set, I'm hoping it won't be such a huge downside.
Hoping so.
Yeah, and I also want to be clear. I wasn't saying no 0 mana cards. I was saying that cards can't be reduced to 0, which I think is a big difference. I think Backstab should exist. I don't think Shadow Step should be able to replay 2 mana cards for free. I think that's where a lot of the issues come in, is when you're able to replay cards that shouldn't be played for 0 mana. And I personally think that should have changed Wondrous Wand. I think that was another problematic card, but I don't think that they want to change that many rogue cards because rogue's already not in a great spot. So like, I don't know. I think that there is room and definitely design space for 0 mana cards. I just don't like the idea of reducing cards that shouldn't be 0 mana to 0 mana. That's all I'm trying to say. And like, I think Shadow Step could still reduce things by 2. That's also not what I'm saying. Like, you can still play an Evil Miscreant for 1 mana after Shadow Stepping it, but it's specifically when you're able to do too much in a turn, I think that leads to poor play experiences from opponents. And I've played a ton of Rogue. I definitely know what it's like to play an Auctioneer and play 10 cards in a turn. And those turns do feel awesome, but I've also been across from people doing that to me, and when it feels like they're doing all of the things and not expending resources to do them, it's just not a very fun experience for me. So I don't know. That was just my thoughts on seeing that these get reduced to 1. Is that maybe in the future it can do that, and maybe a card like Libram could just make it give a +1/+2, and it can be reduced to 1, and 1 mana +1/+2 is still really good. And maybe that's not good enough. And I definitely I see what you're saying with that card specifically, because obviously Paladin's not in a great spot. But if Paladin had a bunch of maybe a better basic and classic set, maybe we'd be complaining about Libram being reduced to 0 mana, and then you play Lady Lyridan, and then all of a sudden you're playing 10 cards in a turn or whatever. So I don't know. It's hard. It's hard to fully tell.
I just think that when you say cards that are not supposed to be reduced to 0 mana, like, I know what you're trying to say there. Like, certain things, right? They're just 2-drops. They're just a whatever, and then you Shadow Step it and it's free. Like, that's one thing. I would argue, though, that there are certain cards, such as in the case of Libram Paladin, like Blessing of Wisdom or Libram of Wisdom, I think is supposed to be 0 mana, right? Like,
yeah, I think I agree.
like,
now
the
that
idea
you say
is
that, I
that
agree with
it
that.
gets reduced to 0 mana. Like, that's the whole point. So it would be kind of tragic for them to create a blanket rule such that it couldn't actually hit that point. And I think that's why they don't quite want to commit to it, just like, we don't reduce things to 0.
Well,
yeah, no, I think you make a really valid point there, and that wasn't a card that came up to the front of my mind. Surprise, surprise, because
it's a
card
Paladin
doesn't
card.
get played.
Yeah.
Card doesn't really.
Though
get
it's
played.
really good in
But yeah,
Wild
I
with
mean,
Idis Darkbane, and if you can name what that card does, I will give you $1.
Wait, what?
Idis Darkbane. Do you know what Idis Darkbane is?
It's the one that shoots for 3. I believe.
Yeah. Idis Darkbane
Whenever it's the
is
target of
it
a
was
spell.
it was a TGT legendary Botticus. You remember the Argent tournament, right? Where you have to in WoW where you have to fight the sisters? Fiola, Lightbane, and Idis
No,
Darkbane.
I know exactly. I know what the other one does.
Yeah. So Idis Darkbane, you target it with the Librams and it deals 3 damage to a random target. It just turns into Soul Juggler with Librams, which is hilarious and amazing, but also I actually think you're both right. Because if you put a 0 mana Libram of Wisdom in Rogue, it would be busted. It would be so insane. It would be disgusting, right? But if you put it in Paladin, it would be Paladin. And, like, whatever. Or if you put it in... Gosh, imagine that with Mana Cyclone in Standard? That would be unbelievable. The thing about 0 mana cards that's scary is that there's no way to guarantee it'll be safe forever, unless it's a really specific defensive effect. But even then, Ironbark is so crazy in Standard right now, and that card looks like pretty miserable. The effect is not worth 2 mana. The effect is barely worth 0 mana. But that and make a 3 mana beast is worth 0 mana. So you never know the context you're going to find these cards. I do agree that Libram of Wisdom, specifically exactly that card, was designed to be 0 mana and is probably healthy currently under that context. But will it always be that way? Because you know what else? What other card was designed to be 0 mana? This card called Ivy. And that was designed to be 0 mana, and that lasted about a day and a half. It's tough. Twin Slice was designed to be 0 mana. That lasted about 2 months. It's hard to say. I see the design idea of play this like a machine gun rapid fire thing is really, really cool. But it's still sketchy. And what we're looking at here to transition into specifically Dragon Queen Alexstrasza, and this is what I think is this is what I like about Togwaggle, and this is what I like about the new Dragon Queen Alexstrasza, where it used to be the dragons cost 0, now the dragons cost 1. Patrick Sullivan, we've brought him up many, many times in the show, but the concept, he's big on the concept of risk and investment, adding dynamic gameplay to card games, and he's low on the idea of immediate value being everything. And this change takes DQA from immediate value to risk and investment. If you were a Highlander Hunter deck, and you were playing the mirror match, currently, if you were the first to DQA, you play it, you have a giant board, and you win. Imagine you play Dragon Queen Alexstrasza, and your opponent goes like Rottnest Drake Stormhammer you, and you're at 10 life. You're behind now. Your position actually got worse because you had this big wind-up, but you didn't get to throw the punch. Same with Togwaggle. How many games where you've been rogue against a Demon Hunter, and you can either play a Togwaggle turn, or you can, like, Shield of Galakron Eviscerate, and you say, it's not worth... I might not survive. I have to make a choice about defending myself versus playing this card. But you never decide. If you have a 4-invoke Galakron, you just play it. You gain your 5 life, you get your weapon, and you kill a bunch of stuff, and then you play a bunch of stuff. It's a choice now. It's a choice of, it's playing this big card is an investment in my next turn, or you have to wait until later in the game to play it. It's a much, much healthier play pattern, and it encourages the player to take risks and develop a game plan, be forward thinking, and if they get there, they can still lose because you have to wind up for the punch. And I really, really like that change, and it makes Standard feel less swingy. You can still get a Nozari, right? Your opponent can still Nozari you, but it might be next turn, or they might have to hold that last dragon. And you can't go Reno Poof, play 0-mana dragon like you've talked about many times, Botticus. If you Galakron into Edwin, you can't play it that turn. If you Galakron into Edwin and Backstab, the Backstab costs 1 now. Can't even play it for free. It makes the player have more choices, and I think that's better. Botticus, I think you've generally convinced me. But if they print a 0-mana card that's not abusable, and there are not really very many of these, I think the reason I keep saying Anubis Out Defenders, I have no other good examples, and that's probably a bad sign. Because I was thinking of, like, Vendetta. But what if Vendetta cost 1? Still be good if you were in a Vendetta deck. Like, it'd be it's better at 0, but it would be fine at 1.
And I mean, I think Edelweiss made the best point there, is that it's not about cards that get reduced to 0 mana. I think that cards that reduce themselves to 0 mana is fine. It's the cards that aren't meant to be played at 0 mana that are the problems.
The reducers, yeah. Like Sorcerer's Apprentice on Ray of Frost is so insane and wild, and would be bonkers in Standard if there was a mage deck, and if there was a 1-mana Mana Worm into 2-mana Sorcerer's Apprentice, Ray of Frost, like, that would be an unpleasant play experience.
So maybe that's...
Please don't touch my source. Please don't touch my apprentice.
It's a matter of time.
No.
It's a matter of time.
So maybe that's the solution in all of this, is cards that reduce other cards to less mana should just not be able to reduce them below 1. And then cards like Libram, technically that card's meant to be reduced to 0 mana, so you can reduce it to 0 mana. Vendetta is supposed to get reduced to 0 mana on its own. It reduces itself to 0 mana. Same with Bog Beam and Ironbark. Those cards themselves reduce to 0 mana. It's all of the, like, the Galakron, your Galakrons, your Shadow Steps, your Togwaggles, even though they didn't end up changing that, your Dragon Queens, those cards. I mean, Primordial Glyph is also a card that probably shouldn't reduce cards to 0 mana, but if you reduce a 3-mana card to 1 mana, that's probably okay. I don't know, Sorcerer's Apprentice. I'm sorry, but probably that card should not reduce 1-mana cards to 0. I mean, it probably just shouldn't happen.
8 out of 10 wild players agree, and the last 2 are playing Waygate Mage.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's an interesting discussion. I'm glad we're able to have it, and I think that Edelweiss swung me in a positive direction.
Yeah.
But there were a lot of other changes too.
There were. So we already talked about how the Dairy Queen ran out of coupons and she's got to pay now. And I do think so. Okay, Dairy Queen. We're not going to talk about meta impacts, but we can talk about card impacts. Do we still play DQA?
Wait. So sorry. What's the question again?
Do we still play Dragon Queen Alexstrasza in our decks, or is the card dead?
I think it's still good enough. 1-mana dragons are generally still pretty good, unless it's like a 1-mana fairy dragon. But if you got a 0-mana fairy dragon off Dragon Queen, you were pretty upset anyway. So I don't know that the mana difference really. I don't know. It still seems powerful. You could still do really powerful things with 1-mana dragons. It's just I don't think it's any longer the Highlander Hunter problem of when they go Bran into Zephrys into Bran into Dragon Queen Alexstrasza and you lose the game, or they don't play any of those cards and they never win, because that seems to be the Highlander Hunter problem. I just think it gives a lot of decks breathing room that is good, but also still can apply pressure later, because you could still play a Dragon Queen Alexstrasza and then next turn play a Tiamat and a big dragon, and it's still pretty powerful. So
Yeah, I certainly think it's still extremely playable. I wonder if maybe we're less inclined to do something like Highlander Warrior, right? Because you're losing a huge power play. It's still very strong, right? As we saw with pocket 1-mana cards are good. These ones, you don't get to choose to have them in your deck, so it's variable. But yeah, I wonder if maybe not having that crazy swing turn means that sort of strictly the decks that already want to be Highlander that you'll be running it in.
Yeah.
I just thought of something.
Oh,
I know we're already off this subject, but what if they would have made Mogu Flesh Shaper where it couldn't reduce itself below 4 or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many knobs and dials there. There's a point where mana reduction is okay and a point where mana reduction isn't, right? Because there is a big difference between Rogue Galakron and Lady Vash Prime, which is technically a Hearthstone card. For those of you that don't know what it does, I don't blame you. It's a 7-mana 5/4 spell damage +1 battle cry. Draw 3 spells from your deck. They all cost 3 mana less. It's not good. It's not a good card. It's a bad card.
One, the Lady Vash Prime, I like to talk about as an example of like this is the worst Prime, because it's like you have to draw it, and then it has to shuffle into your deck, and you have to draw that, which is just like all the other Primes, except that it's the only Prime where you then also need 3 spells that you want to draw and have reduced. So the odds of like all that stuff lining up are not fantastic. So it's just kind of like I don't know, if you've got a free slot, it's can be an okay utility, or if you really want the spell damage on the first half of it. But it's not like Kargath Prime or something where even if you draw it late, you're getting that huge guy shuffled into your deck that's going to gain you 10 armor and kill something. So yeah, it's super unreliable.
So it's an example of how cost reduction is not guaranteeing that a card will be really powerful, right? But also, you can have the other extreme where you have Skull of Gul'dan, and the restriction for this card is play other cards in your deck, and eventually this one will be in the left of your hand, and then you win. And there are a lot of variables here. Mogu Flesh Shaper at 7, really, really strong. Mogu Flesh Shaper at 9. Shaman didn't have the support tools, but it ended up being a lot less relevant. But it was still, I think it still saw some play in Shaman for that minute where it cost 9, but it didn't end up being good.
I just thought of the least broken mana reduction card that could reduce other cards to 0 mana, and it might be Farsight. because
Oh,
I feel like
Shaman.
that card sometimes makes it, and every time I play that card, I always feel like I draw the draw the 1 mana card that's in my deck. You have like you always draw the lightning bolt, and you're like, all right,
Yeah.
well,
It's
I mean, yeah, Farsight is not good for the free Lightning Storm. It is good for the 5 mana Walking Fountain.
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, Farsight is the econ strat of constructed Hearthstone, right? It's you spend 3 mana now to get 3 mana back later, theoretically, and then sometimes you hit a lightning bolt and it's like, okay, I only get 1 mana back, and then I have to spend it in Overload. Anyways, neither here nor there. Overload's a bad mechanic. But to get back to DQA, I think this is a bigger nerf than it looks like. This has gone from a tempo card to a value card. This is a value card now. You play it in Mage because Mage is a value mid-range deck. If Hunter gets lower curve, especially next expansion if it gets better cards, think about how Highlander Hunter looked in Saviors of Uldum. We had Leroy and we topped the curve at 7, and the deck was a lot more aggressive. If we want to build Hunter that way, I don't think we're priced into including a 9-drop. Because it's a 9 mana 8/8 with no text. On turn 9 is an 8/8 with no text. If the format gets aggressive, you can't afford that. You can't afford a 9 mana 8/8 with no text and no initiative. Now, if you survive that turn, it's great the next turn, and you have a lot of really powerful threats, and it's a little bit of reload, so maybe you play it anyways. But if your curve gets lower, if you're going for a more aggressive build, you don't include a 9-drop that generates value. So,
I could see swapping it for Grand Slam.
I could see that, and the Grand Slam has immediate impact, but also it's 10.
Exactly.
Right, it's 10. So, and if you're at 10 mana,
10.
DQA does have its 8/8 plus 1 dragon, right? It's 8/8 plus a thing. So, I could see it if we're still running 9s and 10s, but if we want the curve to go lower, this is not a tempo card anymore. And it was this crazy late game sledgehammer for so long that you played it and you immediately had board. You don't anymore. And I think that means a deck that's looking for more tempo, you might still play it for the reload if you need the reload, but you don't just get a free board out of it anymore, and that's kind of a huge deal. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it is a big nerf. I don't want to be under the impression that it's not, but I mean, it's been so powerful in the turns, in a lot of turns still, that like, I feel like even a lot of Highlander Hunter, you're just applying pressure every turn, and yeah, that 9-drop pressure is not going to be as good, but the other stuff you're following up with is so huge that like the turn after is still going to be pretty big, and it gives a bit of extra breathing room, but not that much extra breathing room.
I mean, as
for a
built,
lot of decks.
as built, Highlander Hunter still wants this card and the Grand Slam, right? We're still like every deck in this
Right.
format is mid range unless you were specifically Demon Hunter. Like every deck is just mid range and is competing for tempo with value kind of being guaranteed everywhere. It's complicated, but I think there are worlds in the near future where DQA could fall out of a list that's looking to be a little bit more aggressive. It'll still see play right now. I don't know if it changes any decks right now, except for the decks that, like you said, Edelweiss, that are Highlander because they want to play Zeph and DQA. I don't know if that's a good enough reason anymore. But in this meta, we still also don't have quite enough really powerful cards that it's probably still worth including. But I could see. I don't know. Well, we've talked about one of the 8 cards, and we're an hour and 10 minutes in. So why don't we move to card number 2?
All 2/3s rejoice. All of the 2/3s rejoice.
Bone Chewer Brawler meta incoming.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so Corsair's Cash only +1 durability. It's feels like it's a lot less consistent damage against the deck where consistent damage allows you to have those combo finishes. So like it's just now this is a value card, and I still think it's probably playable because it's drawing a specific card from a deck. It's still giving you a lot of value for the cost of including it, but it's not going to be able to control the board quite as well, and it's not going to be able to burst as well. So I'm glad that they made this change, but we'll see if it still makes the cut. I feel like it still will, but it's a lot closer instead of an auto include. I don't know that you always include it maybe you always still include it in like wild because you still always need to draw the Ankar. I don't know. What do you all think?
I think it's still pretty important because like the main thing is targeted draw is really powerful, and the part of the stats that they kept was the more important half, right? The durability is what really matters. But yeah, I do think they hitting the attack is a good way to nerf the card because I mean if you think about the damage output you're getting, Ankar adding a durability adds 2 damage, adding +1/+1 adds 5 damage, right? Because it's not just like the one extra swing, it's +1 attack on each of those swings. So I like that you still get whatever utility effects that your weapon is giving you, be it shuffle in a bomb, get a lackey, draw a pirate, right? Like that's really cool. I think that's really most of the reason you're playing the card. But then giving giving one attack just makes all the face damage add up, which I don't think they kind of accounted for. And in particular with like Pirate Warrior and Wild and just like Bomb Warrior, like with Wrench Caliber that adds 6 damage, right? It's like a lot of damage from the extra charge and the extra attack. So I like keeping the utility, making it a value card, and still solid because of targeted draw. But yeah, it didn't need to do quite so much face.
Not even face. It's just it was. You should have to sacrifice tempo for value, right? This is in Magic terms we call this a tutor, where you go and get a specific thing that you want. It is the same problem with recruit that when you're playing a card that says get a specific type, you only want a few options of that type to have consistent hits. And what it was doing when it was giving you a 3/3 weapon every single time, or getting a 4/3 wrench caliber, but usually in standard it was either a 3/3 live wire lance or a 3/3 ankar, is that you were not giving up tempo because you were killing 3 health things, and there was basically nothing coming down except for Edwin Van Cleef or a Warmaul Challenger before turn 3 that you had any trouble killing. So now you get brickwalled by Bone Chewer Brawler, or you get stopped pretty hard by actually anything with a beaming sidekick on it. 1/1 with a beaming sidekick on it lives now. It makes you sacrifice some tempo. You still get a lot of value out of it. That extra weapon durability is a softer nerf. If they gave it +1 attack instead, it would be a huge nerf. I think we would actually consider not playing the card. As of right now, I don't see any deck where I don't play this card. But I'm going to quote something Donkey said in chat here, which I think was great. It's an auto-include when you're running the weapons, but you might not auto-include the weapons just to play cash. And I think that's a smart way to put it. Now, with that being said, Ankar's still in the format and Risky Skipper's still in the format. I'm going to need a really good reason to not go find Risky Skippers for the next, until those cards rotate out, until next April. So as long as in standard I am getting Ankar to get Risky Skipper, I am keeping this in my deck. Maybe we cut the lances, but probably not. But maybe, I don't know. But we're keeping in Ankar and Skipper, so we're keeping in cash.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Metamorphosis, I don't have a lot to say about this other than yay, we no longer have to play against a 6-mana Pyroblast over 2 turns.
Just
even
kinda
though
silly.
technically it costs
7.
7, but it technically costs 7, but the 1 mana you pay on the next turn is fairly irrelevant. It's really just the upfront. Yeah, I mean it's still a lot of damage. It probably still makes the cut, but maybe
Does it?
maybe I don't know. It's still 8 damage. It depends on if Tempo Demon Hunter is still a deck. I don't know. I've already talked about this card more than I wanted to. I'm just glad it does less damage.
Like, yes, I think there is a question as to whether or not we include this in Tempo Demon Hunter going forward, but Tempo Demon Hunter is very different due to a later nerf, so I think actually discussions of that other card will lead us to figure out about this card. But any thoughts, Edelweiss?
Yeah, I mean it falls, much more in line with Inner Demon, right? 8 mana, 8 damage. Now this is 7 mana, 8 damage. I think, yeah, when it was 7 mana, Pyroblast, like that's obviously really good. Everyone played 2 copies of Pyroblast when Pyroblast was 8 mana. So
Ugh, that was 8 mana.
it's still gonna it's still gonna be really solid because it's flexible, right? Because it's not actually Inner Demon, right? You don't have to use your face for that damage, which is something that Demon Hunter usually has to do. So it's great having the option of you use it to remove something. I think it feels a lot better to use for board control versus to just send face now. And I don't know, to me that almost feels more Metamorphosis-y, right? Is like without it being like, yeah, you always want this to go face and you're in a bad spot when it doesn't go face. Like now it's just like I'm changing forms, giving me this flexibility to do another thing, right? To use this damage to hit something so that I don't take so much to my own face.
Yeah. Still kills a Glaive
I think
Bound
it falls in
Adept.
line a lot more.
Still kills a Glaive Bound Adept, right? And the control Demon Hunter decks that have been popping up probably still play this. The tempo decks, I'm less sure. Yeah. Speaking of tempo Demon Hunter cards, Kane Sun Fury.
It's slightly worse. Probably still very good. I don't know. It's like it feels similar to the secret rogue card
Hanar.
nerf. Hanar. It feels similar to the Hanar nerf, where it's just like, okay, this thing's now more reasonable because maybe you can actually kill it instead of staring at it and being like, well, I could do like 3 I could do like 4 damage to this maybe, but
Could soften it up. Could just like
yeah,
sand it down, but you can't really do much else. Yeah.
feels like you
you'll
can do
notice,
2 damage a lot to things.
You'll notice this happens a lot with things that are 5 health, right?
Yeah.
We had Evil Miscreant printed at 1/5. Just a misprint. Hanar printed at 1/5. Just a misprint. I think 4 mana 3/5 is a stat line we have seen a lot more, and it being like okay on stuff like Fandral. But this is not Fandral, and yeah, 3/4 feels a lot better for the power of the card.
Yeah. Like, yeah, the stat penalties are good for really powerful effects. Yeah, let's move on to the next one.
Yeah. By the way, also it's probably still very good.
Oh yeah, don't take Kane out of any deck that you're currently playing Kane in. I can't think of anything else to say.
Oh, why? Oh, we were doing so good. All right, Warglaives of Azeroth.
Botticus, you were taunting me, and
yeah.
I ignore taunts.
Just this. Okay. Yeah, I'm glad this card got changed. I almost feel like I wish it got nuked from orbit. But at least it's worse. So thanks.
Hey, if it went to 7, it could still be an odd Demon Hunter.
That's true. It could compete with Flame Reaper. You would have to choose which 7 mana class weapon to put in. This card asks the question, does Tempo Demon Hunter still exist? And if it does, do we build it the same way? Now, I don't have a great answer for that, but there are too many good Demon Hunter cards to build to not include this, but this was a deck-defining card. And also in Wild, this probably kills Odd Demon Hunter, or at least makes it way, 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 way worse. Way worse. Void Lords actually stop you now unless you have Consume Magic.
Yeah, I think Warglaives at 6 is like solidly, this is your mid-range payoff, right? Because that's kind of the breaking point, right? Is when you put 6s in your deck, besides Skull of Gul'dan, you're mid-range.
Skull of Gul'dan doesn't cost 6; it costs -3.
Yeah,
exactly.
I was literally gonna say the same thing. Also, maybe have that card reduce cards just down to 1. Maybe that was an idea. Who knows?
We'll get there. We'll get there. But yeah, Warglaives always felt like this is kind of like it was walking that line, and I think at 6 mana it feels more mid-rangey, and I'm okay with something like Warglaives at 6 like doing some work to invalidate other mid-range plays, but like 5 is too much because now it is 7 mana to use with your hero power to get that 4 damage, which is important, or 5 damage with Twin Slice at 7 mana, right? It's just it's a lot more in line with what people are doing at that stage in the game. And at 5, it was just like, I mean, we haven't had mid-range. Maybe we can now, right? Because you aren't going into their turn 5 saying like, well, I don't want to play my taunt now because it just gets devoured, right? Like, I would always have this thing against Demon Hunter where it'd be like, let me play my other stuff that like contests for board so that they'll use their Warglaives on it, and then I'll save my taunt for later. And then of course you die to Kane. But it's like
Yes.
now there's a real decision to be made in terms of what kind of deck you're playing with Warglaives. And I think it also is interesting because Demon Hunter, right, on release, if you're playing non-Demon Hunter cards, they're probably worse, right? And we've started seeing more and more non-Demon Hunter cards in the lists, which is nice, right? More recently, the Amani and Bone Chewer Brawlers in there, along with the Frost Weavers. I think that's good, right? Maybe another neutral card takes the place of Warglaives. Maybe you run something like Faceless Corruptor. I don't know if you have enough hits for that, but like maybe that takes the Warglaive spot, and like Faceless Corruptor's fine, you know.
I'm gonna put out a thought experiment to the listeners because otherwise we're gonna be here for another 3 hours. But I wonder how many fewer Demon Hunter cards they could have changed if the hero power just would have cost 2 mana. If they would have had 2 mana plus 2 attack. I wonder how many, if we could have just left a ton of Demon Hunter cards the way they were, had them be super good, and just if the hero power wasn't like 1 mana, where it just feels, I don't know, that card the hero power feels super powerful.
It was pretty late that they made it 1 mana, so I don't want to say I wouldn't be surprised, but like I would be curious if a lot of them were sort of centered around 2 mana 2 attack, and then they just sort of left them at 1 mana 1 attack. Maybe.
I've heard crazier ideas, right? I've heard crazier ideas, and they finalized this hero power 4 months before they shipped the set, which is a very, very, very short window. Now, it ended up, the play pattern feels cool. The power level was crazy. This is what happened. There is an anecdote I'm going to give from Magic the Gathering. This is what happened with 2 mechanics that were released back-to-back. It was called Affinity for Artifacts, and then a card called Skull Clamp was printed. And we're going back. This is a Magic anecdote from 16 years ago. I understand that there is a limited appeal here, but basically the story is about the same. I have an article about Magic the Gathering directly from Magic that I want to read here. I have it somewhere here. That's not where it is. Where are you, Aaron Forsyth?
While Hat's finding that, for reference, Skull Clamp was a thing that gave +1/-1, and if the creature died that it was equipped to, you drew 2 cards. So it was kind of weird in that you could think, oh, well, you buff the attack of your minion and like block with it, attack in with it, you get some cards, but usually it just meant you would put it on something that would die just from being equipped, and then you would draw your 2 cards. And it was, I think, just 1 mana to equip.
Yeah, it was spectacularly broken. It was an endless card draw engine, effectively. But I'm going to read this paragraph from a Magic the Gathering article from 2004. And this is, they post the notes of the card's development history, and everyone is expecting this giant, long conversation. But the reality is there was one comment, and quoting Aaron directly, he's the director of R&D, "That's it in all its glory. That change was made with over a month to go before the set was to be typeset, and none of us ever batted an eyelash at the card. Often when cards are changed that will impact our constructed playtesting, a memo was sent out notifying everyone about the changes and urging people to try the new incarnations of the cards. No such memo ever went around regarding this card. No one thought of it as necessary. In hindsight, it should have been obvious. Part of the problem was that our views of the card were tainted by its earlier incarnations, which were very bad. And the other part of the problem is that even without old bias, the card's power is not that easy to parse at first glance. By no means am I saying that is an excuse for us missing it. We're paid professionals. We're supposed to find and fix stuff like that, but we were entrenched in our own internal metagame, and this card slipped through the cracks. That is exactly the same as Demon Hunter. We've seen the Newsweek article where they said Skull of Gul'dan was in their big Demon Hunter decks, and they were inconsistently reducing pick commanders to 6 and just feeling on top of the world. And it was a different experience. It's hard to test. They missed it. But the change wasn't some giant thing where everyone had this fierce internal debate over it. It seemed like a cool change. They played with the cards. They had fun. And that was what happened. And that's what happened with Demon Hunter, it seems like. So I think you're right, Botticus, that some of these cards would have been balanced differently. I don't mind the direction we're going in, which is keeping the hero power distinct and unique, even if it needs to be changed down the road, in order for these cards to have a different feel and a cool playstyle. But I like the direction they're going and making them more awkward to use. And I think Warglaive Vaznoth is a great example of a card they've made more awkward to use. And I will illustrate the example of how different this card's power level is with one opposing card. Kartut Defender. Warglaives into turn 6, on turn 6, into Kartut Defender, you would fit in the hero power, smack, deal 4 to whatever. Now, if you play Warglaive Vaznoth into a Kartut Defender, you have to hit it 3 times, and your opponent gains 6 life. You lose a swing out of it, because you don't have the mana to hero power. You can't 0 mana Twin Slice it. It is a dramatically different card. Substantially, dramatically different card. It is a mid-range control tool now. It is not really an aggressive tool the same way. It will stay in control Demon Hunter, but aggro Demon Hunter can't be built around this card anymore, and that means the deck fundamentally changes in a good way. So, I think this makes a lot of sense, and it was originally going for -1 durability here, but I like that they're just making it so much worse at proactively contesting the board. It is a reactive card now, and 1 mana does make that much of a difference. Yes. Speaking of 1 mana making a difference.
Dragoncaster, 7 mana. I guess this changes it a little bit, kind of. I don't know. Going from 6 to 7 on a card like this is, I don't know.
Underwhelming.
Yeah, I mean, they could have just left it at 6 mana, and then maybe you can't reduce cards down to 0 mana. It reduces it down to 1 mana, and maybe that change makes a lot of
Botticus
sense,
has an
and
agenda.
I don't know. Maybe that, I'm just saying. You know?
Yeah,
Maybe.
I would have liked maybe reduces by 6, right? Sort of a foil to that elemental, that arcane tyrant we talked about. Whereas like if you played something expensive, it went down to 0. Dragoncaster, it costs 6 and like reduces a thing by 6, so you can still do your Dragoncaster Blizzard or Dragoncaster whatever. It's sort of like it's a free 4/4 with your thing that you play, like at 8 mana.
Like a
but
reverse
like,
arcane tyrant.
Right, yeah. I get that that's not really what they were going for with the card, but I just don't love cheesing out 10 mana spells, particularly Puzzle Box, with something like this. It does make Conjurer's Calling interesting, because like that's more of a thing. Dragoncaster, Conjurer's Calling your Dragoncaster. Now you get 7 drops instead of 6 drops. I haven't done the math to figure out how much better that is on average.
Well, it's 6 versus 7. It's 1 better.
In terms of the minion pool, but because I think 7 has been pretty variable over the years in terms of the minion quality. What with Linessa Sun Sorrow being a 7 mana 1/1, currently we have Bran as a 2/4.
Yeah, they do weird
So-
stuff at 7. They
Yeah.
usually like, but also they get Bloodboiled Root, right? Like it's you can get some funky stuff at 7. It probably makes Conjurer's Calling more interesting. And
Marsh Hydra.
which card?
Marsh Hydra? I think that's what it's called.
Yes.
It's the
Oh,
7 mana 7/7
that's-
rush that gives you an 8 drop.
that's
It's my
probably the high roll,
favorite
right?
7 drop.
That's the high roll. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's sick.
For sure.
I don't know. We don't take this out of Highlander Mage, right? It just makes Highlander Mage a little worse.
Yeah, it means that you're getting turn 7 boxed instead of turn 6 boxed, or turn 6 on the coin instead of turn 5 on the coin.
Yeah, I mean you're only
Uh,
saving 1 mana on Power of Creation or Deep Freeze. It's just less of a discount.
Right. Yeah.
There are no
appreciate
good
that.
9s right now, I don't think.
Yeah, in some sense, I feel like it almost even more encourages doing on box instead of on Power of Creation or Deep Freeze, as you say, because it's just a 1 mana discount.
Yeah.
Buttbox will hopefully get worse over time, right? That's one of those sort of
Please.
inverse situations where it's like the more stuff is in the pool, typically the worse it gets. So yeah, hopefully it just removes itself from the meta by getting too diluted.
I hope
All right,
so.
we got 2 more, and I'm sure you're very happy about one of them because it deals with a deck that you're not super thrilled about, Fungal Fortunes. From
Let's
2
talk
mana
about
to 3
Fungal
mana.
Fortunes. Yeah.
That might be, I don't know. Hold on, let me look at this list. I think that's probably the most significant change on this list. It's pretty close with this and the next one for me.
Fungal
Like
Fortunes?
in my,
Whoa, really?
I think so. I think it might be the most significant. I mean, going from 2 to 3 is technically the most significant because it's the most increase out of all of these. But yeah, there's so many less things you can do with a more expensive Fungal Fortunes. Just think about how powerful, like the power difference between a 2 mana Wild Growth and a 3 mana Wild Growth is. It's like the amount of times you can fit it in randomly. It's just so much more, it's so much more clunky, especially with just how Druid kind of works, that I think this is a very significant nerf to the card, and is going to, I think it's going to have a big effect on Druid. I feel like Druid still is going to do some stupid stuff, but I just think that there's so many situations that are going to become really awkward because you're not going to have the thing with Druid is it has all this churn, right? It gets through its cards relatively quickly. It gets its mana pretty fast, and then it does really stupid things that people don't enjoy playing against. But just having that core card that you're always, before you're just always keeping this card, right? It's one of the best cards you can possibly have, and just having it get delayed a little bit, and maybe then that delays you getting the removal you need to survive the early game. I think it has this cascading effect that I'm hoping is going to make that deck considerably worse, but I could be wrong. I haven't played a ton of the deck or played against it a ton, but it feels very significant to me.
It does feel significant. I think you still keep it in the mulligan every time. Because the main thing, right, is like you really want Overgrowth. And if you don't have Overgrowth, the next best thing is something that draws you 3 cards to find Overgrowth or Breath of Dreams, right? I suppose the trade-offs that I most see directly are like, if you're in a matchup where you're going to need to play that Bog Beam on 3, you're having to choose between like the Bog Beam or the Fungal Fortunes. But it does open up Wrath on 2, so maybe that kind of balances out. But I think it's still very much keeping the mulligan to find your ramp if you don't already have the ramp. But it does get, I think, specifically worse in sort of your late game fitting in with the plays, because before you could Mount Cellar Fungal Fortunes on 10 and still play a 1 mana spell, and now like you need to find your free stuff because Mount Cellar Fungal Fortunes is all your mana. So I think that's really where it puts the squeeze on, is those late game like huge swingy turns are like just that much more using your mana. So I hope it makes a big difference, because I don't think it's going to kill the deck by any means, and I think you still keep it pretty much all the time.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the keeping it in the mulligan, but also like I feel like when in the few games that I did play the Druid deck, how often did you want to play the Fungal Fortunes on 2 so you could remove the important creatures on 3? Now, even if you have to reverse that, their less important creatures are going to be out by turn 2, so that on turn 3 you have to now make a decision whether you're going to try to remove some of the minions or you're going to Fungal Fortunes and then go into the Overgrowth turn. And having 2 turns off where they're able to develop into the fungal, like into the Overgrowth. Now you can develop into a Fungal Fortunes turn and then develop again into the Overgrowth turn, and it's way worse for the Druid instead of them having that turn 2 where they're like Fungal Fortunes on turn 2, remove a couple things on turn 3 because I have all this card economy, and then Overgrowth on 4 set up for the big turn on 5.
I have feelings. So all the things you all said are correct. This is an impactful nerf. It impacts turn 2 significantly. It impacts turn 9 significantly, or 8 mana Innervate into Fungal Fortunes with Mount Seller. It impacts turn 10 Ysera Innervate Fungal Fortunes. Can't do that anymore either. It makes the deck clunkier. My problem with this nerf is not any of the things you all said, and I think it is a huge impact on turn 2 because you would play it to make your hand better to find the overgrowth turns. And that is 100%, it would enable those significantly. So now what you do is you hope to breath on 2, and it just makes the deck swingier. It just makes the deck swingier because you want to breath into OG, or you can breath into Fortunes into Swarm. It just makes breath better. And this card is still a good refill. Druid is a mana-inefficient deck that has alternating giant swing turns and air. Giant swing turns and nothing. And this is still good on the nothing turns. And it just makes the early game less reliable, but the deck was already not reliable, so I don't know if it makes the deck worse. It makes the games worse. Because you're looking for fewer Keleseths, but it's still very much a deck that's all about finding your Keleseth. Find a broken thing at a specific spot in the game, and maybe you mulligan harder, maybe you don't keep this. Maybe you just go for Breath into Dragon. Maybe that's all you do, right? Maybe you mulligan pretty hard for Overgrowth. Maybe you do keep this in matchups where if you're against a slower deck, if you see a Priest Portrait, you keep it. If you're against Demon Hunter, you don't. This will change the deck's ability to consistently be successful, but I don't feel like it's consistently successful now. It makes it clunkier, but it was already clunky. It makes the bad things about Druid worse, and the good things about Druid stay about the same. And I feel really weird about that, because now I want to hit Breath and Overgrowth so much more, and when I do, the deck is going to be so much better, and this nerf won't feel like it matters. And the games where I have this in hand on 2 mana, and I just Hero Power Pass, it makes the deck feel worse. I don't know how I feel about that, about it's not removing the engine. It's just making it run worse. And that means some days your car starts when you're going to work, and some days it doesn't. But, like, it'll still eventually get you there, or maybe it won't. I don't know. Feels like it makes the part of Druid that I don't like even more Druidy.
I think ramp is really difficult for that reason. And I have kind of conflicting thoughts, because I really enjoy ramp Druid decks, right? You know, getting out your big stuff quickly, but I recognize that it can be pretty feels bad. I do kind of wonder, like, I don't know, how bad would it really be if Overgrowth costs 5?
I could see it.
Because we used to Nourish at 5. That gave us 2 full mana crystals.
Well, we nourished when we had UI. Anyway. We nourished when we could get the cards back.
Right, and this is the thing, right? We Overgrowth when we have Overflow, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of this thing where it's like they seem to always put ramp and card draw at the same time. And I don't know, I kind of think maybe it would be nice if we put ramp and just big things, right? That was the trade-off, right? Is you're ramping into something like Marsh Hydra, which
you and Marsh Hydra.
That sick curve.
Are you the only person playing Marsh Hydra and standing?
Right? I probably. But like I think honestly, like that's the sweet curve, right? If what we were doing with Overgrowth was 4 into 6, and then on 7 you're playing Marsh Hydra, I think that's really awesome. But because we have something like Overflow and Fungal Fortunes, we're just drawing through our deck and doing ridiculous stuff with Mount Seller.
Yeah. And but this is also context dependent too. In the next expansion, I am confident and desperate to say that there will be better Druid things to do. That we will have more consistent Druid cards, there will be better things to do than take all the minions out of our deck except for 3 and play a bunch of 0 mana spells and make a crazy board and then Glowfly Swarm or whatever. I think there is a way for Druid to get better and not rely on these kind of mechanics, but I agree 100%. If you don't have to choose between ramp and value, if you don't have to choose between getting closer to the end game and having stuff to do when you get there, then yeah, you're invalidating a lot of the downside of ramp. And that's what UI did, and Overflow kind of does the same thing. So I think that's really well said.
Please don't do ramp into Master Okark, though. Thank you. This has been my TED Talk.
Yes. So speaking of card draw and mana reduction being dangerous when put together, the last nerf here. Well, I think we all saw something coming, but we weren't sure what. Let's talk about the Rogue Galakron, Botticus. What did they change?
I thought I brought this up when I first went through all the cards, but in case you didn't hear, instead of reducing the cards to 0 mana, it now reduces the cards that you draw to 1 mana, which has kind of been the theme of a lot of what I was talking about when we very first started the discussion. But this is a very big nerf to Rogue. Rogue already wasn't in like a great place, but also felt miserable to play against when they had the turn 7 fully upgraded Galakron. So I don't know. It's interesting, at least. I feel like this was a nerf that probably could have happened quite a while ago, and it would have been better for a lot of people's sanity during the time when Rogue was the best deck. And I think I like this nerf, even though Rogue's not in a great spot. And I feel weird about that.
It's strange, right?
I don't know. It's weird. Like I guess I'm just on this crusade to change all cards that reduce cards that shouldn't be reduced to 0 down to 0. Like that's just part of my whole crusade. So like I'm okay with this nerf, but it kind of sucks because my favorite class is like a playable class that you don't really want to play because there's better stuff to play.
Wait a
but
minute.
It's probably okay.
Did this whole thing start because of keeping prep? Did this whole crusade against mana reduction start with you insidiously suggesting, no, you don't keep prep? You don't need that. You don't need that mana reduction. This has been going for years. The Botticus agenda. It's been going on since you joined the show. How did I not see it? You came on to talk about Big Priest. You told me not to keep prep, and here we are. Episode title: The Botticus Agenda. Mark it on your calendar.
You figured it out. You figured out my master plan, and now it's in people's heads, and people support me. Support me in my decision to back not reducing cards to 0 mana, unless they're supposed to get reduced to 0 mana in specific cases. So
the ironic thing here is that
you figured me out.
The ironic thing here is you were prepared all along. That's the irony. So anyways.
Well, what do you think about this card, Edelweiss? What are your thoughts? You go ahead.
So I am a big fan of this for exactly the reasons that they described. Giving people time to react before the crazy stuff happens is fantastic. I think that my sort of optimistic hope for this change is that it will let people be more creative with Rogue. Because I think since Galakron has been out for Rogue, it's just been like, well, Rogue's thing is that it plays 0 mana cards, so why would we ever do anything else with Rogue right now? And it's just like, you got Heist Bear and Togwaggle, and you've got the Galakron, and we just do really wacky stuff with 0 mana cards. But now I think that it maybe becomes a lot more viable to go for the aggressive strategies. Again, we've had these stealth cards that people have literally only been playing for like the 3 mana 3/3 draw 2 and shadow step that. Well, you can still do that in a stealth deck, and the Ash Tongue Slayer that gives +3 attack and immune for the turn. That's a really good card. Like, whether you're actually taking advantage of the immune to trade or you're just going face. Like, I did surprisingly well against Demon Hunters with a sort of 4-weapon stealth rogue, just because their life is a huge resource, and if you just keep hitting them and they can't Warglaves your stealthed minions, you get to pressure their life total a lot. And 2 charges of 4 damage on your weapons is a lot of damage. So I would hope that this change differentiates Rogue a bit, so that it's not just a given that you play Galakron. I don't think it will kill the Galakron decks. I think people will still do that because changing your hero power to generate a lackey is still quite strong. But I'm hoping that it opens up some space for people to start trying other things in Rogue that don't necessarily run the Galakron.
I literally could not have said it better. That is perfect. That is fantastic. Yes, this is the Genin Baku problem, where when you have this, why would you do anything else? When you have this Galakron, why would you do anything else? You start your deck with Galakron to Galakron support cards, Tog, Waggle, Edwin, and Backstab, and you work backwards from there. And there's no good reason to not do that, and there would not have been a good reason to not do that until April. Because the effect is so powerful, and the cost is so relatively minimal, and lackeys are good enough that this is taking any rogue deck is better when you add Galakron in, and not doing it is only for the sake of not doing it. Now, with that being said, do we still play Galakron Rogue? We might. It's a lot worse. It's substantially worse. Significantly, substantially, a really major way worse. We don't have as much mid-game defense. Like, you would slam Galakron on 7 a lot just to play 1 or 2 cards and hope to high roll a Kronks. And you would get the hero power online. You're better against value decks, and that's fine. But if consistent aggressive strategies exist, it's a big, big nerf. Now, it's not really a nerf in your value matchups because it was all about pressure over time there anyways. But against the decks that Demon Hunter was holding down, against your Murloc Paladins and Totem Shamans or whatever, against other aggressive strategies, or against Demon Hunters themselves, it's substantially different. Now, it's going to depend how the meta looks. If it's a value mid-range meta, this is fine. If it is an aggressive meta, this is not fine. And to that I would say we have a 9th card on the list here, which is Risky Skipper, but we don't. And the thing that saves Galakron Rogue in this meta is that all the decks that would beat Rogue when it Galled on 7 and died the next turn lose to Skipper. And I think that might mean if we stay in a mid-rangey meta, that Gala for value, or waiting until turn 9 and getting 2 cards, or waiting until turn 10 and getting 3 cards, might be good enough. You beat Druid already you didn't beat Druid by getting to this. You beat Druid by playing Edwin and QAs, right? You beat it with Edwin or Scuffed Edwin. You beat Demon Hunter a lot of the times by having Backstab and Seal Fate and mid-range cards, and maybe you go back to Faceless Corruptors, right? Maybe we change how the deck looks. Maybe we go back to having a little bit more mid-game board control. Maybe the deck gets a lot worse if the meta is a lot more aggressive. This is a substantial nerf. A really big nerf of the card. There are reasons to play other rogue decks right now, but also the reason that other rogue decks aren't seeing play is because the other rogue strategies aren't complete right now. Other things to do with rogue, you don't have enough. So there's not really a reason to play those either. It's not like they were competitive, but the Galakron lists are better. It's if you're not playing this rogue, there isn't a rogue deck. And that is a little scary, right? Rogue is going to get a lot worse. But if the meta is still mid-range and value-oriented, this card is still fine. The hero power is still good. It's worse. Hand size management becomes more important. Edwin becomes more important. But it might just make the game swingier as opposed to making the deck worse. And I don't know how big of a nerf that is. But if you play this and then you get hit for a bunch of damage because you couldn't play anything the turn you ran it out there, yeah, that matters. And I think we'll see this difference a lot more as the meta develops. I think we'll see this a lot more in 5-set and 6-set metas when we actually have good aggressive tools in the format and when they nerf Risky Skipper. Because as long as Risky Skipper is unnerfed in this format, going wide is a mistake. And as long as going wide is a mistake, playing aggro is hard. And as long as playing aggro is hard, then value is king. And as long as value is king, then Galakron belongs in the meta, even with these mana cost issues. As long as we're playing DQA for 1 mana dragons, we can still play Galakron the Nightmare for 1 mana cards.
I will say banning Warrior gets a lot more interesting in tournaments.
Yes, it does.
Because, now that you don't have Demon Hunters preying on you as well, maybe that's at least where we get to see these more aggro rogues pop up. I think my favorite rogue, not rogue card is Burrowing Scorpid, because that card is sick. Like, you finish off something, then you have this 5/2 stealth that hits them in the face, and then you shadow step it and kill something else, and you hit them in the face again. Like, that 5 attack is so great with the stealth. So I would love to see some more of that kind of action.
Also, listeners out there, I understand you may be watching this live in Twitch chat, you may be hearing this. You may be hearing this. What I want you to do is take a piece of paper, open the notes app on your phone, and write down, but now Backstab and Shadow Step cost 1 mana. I want you to write that down as many times as you can. Get it out of your system. Just write it down a whole bunch of times. And then you can close the note, and then we can talk about the card. But that is not the thing that makes Galakrond worse now. That is not the thing. Because I understand it was already really bad to draw Backstab and Shadow Step, and it's gone from I didn't get value to I literally can't play this card. It makes the bad case worse. And, that is a relevant part of the card, but the real big deal here is that you don't just get to build this crazy board out of nowhere when you play it on 7. You don't get to Kronks anymore. So having a Backstab you can't cast in your hand feels bad, but you were never happy already to draw a Backstab off Galakrond. We were never happy to get it off of Kronks. We were happy to Galakrond into gross stuff that we played and cheated way too much mana for, and making Backstab worse the next card, but still having the 1 mana Edwin or the 1 mana QA to follow it up. The important part of the card isn't that my 0 mana cards cost 1 now. Like that my 0 mana base cost cards cost 1 now. The important part of the card is that it is a value card instead of a tempo card, much like the DQA change. So it's really important to focus in on that. Focusing in on my 0 mana cards cost 1, I think really draws attention to the wrong parts of this change. Because the important part of this change is that it's not for tempo at all anymore. It's for refill and a later game swing turn. I hope that makes sense. Not saying you shouldn't say, but Backstab and Shadow Step cost 1. No, they do. It's been highly discussed. But I think it draws attention to the wrong part of the nerf. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yes.
I think it does. And do you want to do a quick summary? Because we kind of talked about everything already with this, but we did have Alec make a little post here about some of their notes onto to why they made these changes, and specifically notes some of the things that they wanted to accomplish with these changes. And Hat put it in here. So why don't you go ahead and summarize what Alec said?
I would love to. We'll put them on the stream as well. Balance changes are coming early next week. For this balance patch, we're looking at 3 main categories: Demon Hunter mana reduction and setting up classes for the remainder of the year. Demon Hunter is still the #1 force in the meta, has a great role in determining whether or not a deck is competitive on the ladder. The changes to Kane's Sun Fury Metamorphosis are slight adjustments focused on Demon Hunter's reach and the ability to control the board. Warglaze Vaznoth was one of the best cards in the class, especially in aggressive decks. In the future, we want to be able to push Demon Hunter into archetypes other than aggro and tempo. As for mana reduction, we want to lessen some of the giant swings currently in the game. Swing turns will still be present in Hearthstone. There's a healthy medium there, but not to the extent of Dragon Queen, Alexstrasza, or Galakrond Rogue. Dragoncaster moved to 7 mana to make that turn a bit more appropriate as to when it's occurring in the match. Fungal Fortunes and Corsair Cash were both strong performing cards that limit some of our ability to extend those classes into different spaces later in the year. These changes should make it easier for future archetypes to take shape and be competitive. Finally, thank you for all the feedback throughout the last few months. We're always listening, so keep it coming. I will say, the most important thing that I can say about the development team is they have listened. They have 100% listened so clearly. And it's been really nice to see, because I think it was super obvious that there were some issues with 0 mana cards. And I think that specific feedback was shared with them, right? Like, I remember specific tweets about that thing, and then they changed that thing. That was not what I was expecting. It was kind of a nice surprise.
Yeah, I don't know that I've ever correctly predicted a way that they would nerf a card. I always go to like other things that they like out there theories and possibilities, and then I finally said maybe they should just let cards only reduce to 1, and they did that, and that's interesting. That's great. I'm very glad that they're listening to feedback. It seems like whether or not these changes make a difference, it makes a difference in my perspective of how they're listening to feedback, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, and the format is in an interesting spot, and really we're in an interesting spot in our relationship with the format. This will make things a little bit fresher for the end of the meta. It will also make things very fresh for the Masters Tour next week, which we'll talk about in just a moment. And it's a really big shift, but also it's just nice that they didn't leave things the way they were. And the sentiment that I saw over the past few days, past week or so, was that people were kind of bored, and this will at least give us a little something to do until the next set comes out. Rumors on the internet are that the announcement is going to be next week for the next expansion as well, so we might have a lot going on. But I guess after that hour and 54-minute news section, oh my goodness, we should probably talk about tournaments real quick. Are you all ready?
Ready here.
It's the grand tournament!
All right, I'm not going to keep this too long. Famous last words, I know. Things are getting real weird in qualifiers. Really, really, really weird. So Warrior is still the class, right? And there are a bunch of different ways to play Warrior. But it's you can play Control Warrior, you can play Bomb Warrior, you can play a little bit of everything. And it's still by far the best way to win a qualifier. Every lineup except 4 had a Warrior deck in them. But it was an even mix between Control and Rage and Bomb. There are some target Warrior lineups that are involved, which usually has Priest. It can be either Split Priest or Highlander Priest. Actual Gala Priest is not doing as well. And you can also include Pure Paladin. Pure Paladin. Weird, right? You just gain a bunch of life and make a bunch of beefy taunts. Strange, but that can target a Rage Warrior, and Rage Warrior can't really beat that effectively. Now, Demon Hunter is still good too, but it's not winning as much. People are either targeting it or banning it. Control Demon Hunter is good in the ban Warrior lineups. Often you're targeting Priest and Tempo Demon Hunter. Sometimes you can include Quest Warlock. But Control Demon Hunter has actually won, I think, 4 qualifiers this past week, which is surprising because on ladder it isn't performing as well. It doesn't have a good Warrior matchup. But if you're banning Warrior and you want to beat other Demon Hunters, the Control Demon Hunter list is the way to do that. And that deck is probably sticking around because making things cost more mana in that deck is not actually as big of a deal. You can also, if you want to get real saucy, you can target Druid with Murloc Paladin and Totem Shaman. Yes, Botticus, Murloc Paladin, and Totem Shaman, which includes double Sidekick, double Og Merchant. And if you just
you were talking about Totem Shaman 2 weeks ago,
it's
and it piqued my interest, but consider my interest more piqued.
yes, you thought it had peaked, but there was another like a hidden peak higher, even though peaked is a different word. Yeah.
It only gets better with the Warglaves nerf.
Yes.
That was a card that really made me scared, and now we can just commit fully and go all in on the totems.
So it's a weird world we're going to live in. Now on ladder it'll still be different. On ladder it's still... What we're doing in ladder is... Well, we're going back to the pre-nerf meta as of right now. Demon Hunter is just as good as it was before, if not better. The Twin Slice rework did not fundamentally change win rates or ladder comps. Meta has stabilized. You're either playing DH or Warrior, or you're playing something to target one of those 2 decks and probably losing to the other one. Or you're doing what I did, which is just load up Druid and hope that the ramp hits. Yeah.
Don't do that. That doesn't sound enjoyable.
I enjoyed winning.
Mm.
Yeah, but I had to cover the mirror afterwards. It was a whole thing. Now, this is the most important topic of tournaments, is that Masters Tour Online is July 16th, which is 7 days from today. And the Nerfs are on July 14th, which is 5 days from today. And by my quick math, 7 minus 5 is 2, which is how many days the players for the event have to prepare in client. Is 2 days. So, Smiley Chris wrote in, and I think it's an important question to cover now. How long is the optimal time before a major tournament for Nerfs if you want to see new decks and strategies? Too long and things are settled. Not long enough, people don't risk bringing new decks. They don't have time to properly test. What is the sweet spot? What do we think of this window? This 2-day window?
It's too short.
2 days is definitely pretty short. I've personally had shorter, but
Okay, WSOE was a special, extreme circumstance. That was like, you can't sleep tonight if you want to have good decks.
I didn't really. I went to bed at 3 a.m. Might have been too early.
Oh, that's normal, right?
Yeah.
That's when people go to sleep?
But yeah, I think probably you want at least a week for something major like a Masters Tour. I think with the number of people who play Hearthstone, a week is good enough for certain things to get publicly, like to become public knowledge, but for some people to still have like their secret list that they haven't told anyone about yet. I think it's kind of that nice sweet spot that can still like support creativity on the part of some people, but let others just kind of net deck certain things. Because I definitely know players where they're like, no, I want the solved meta because then I can just be like really good at the thing, and like let that like number of games played show. I personally prefer the more creative thing, but 2 days is pretty short. For example, people can practice in the NSG tournament I'm going to be running on the 15th, but which will be the day before. But yeah, I think it's okay for something that's like a small tournament. I mean, I feel like my tournaments are almost kind of a sub-in for like a fireside. Like that's where it's fun. But when it's something major like a Masters tour, I feel like it's got to be at least a week.
Yeah, I think we even said last week that if the nerf was coming out today, I think it'd be fine. If instead of the announcement, we got the announcement early in the week and we got the patch today, I don't know that people would. I mean, people would always complain, but I don't think that they would have as much of a leg to stand on as with it being 2 days before, because something we've talked about a lot on the show too is that we want to reward consistency. We want the hunter races to continue to be grandmasters, assuming that they're still playing the game a lot and they're still really good, which I think we all know that hunter race is still very good, and we want to reward consistency. And definitely a way to not reward consistency is not give people enough time to prepare for a tournament, which is essentially what they're doing with these nerfs. And I feel like with only 2 days to prepare, it's going to be a lot less about creative deck building and more about the luck of finding what the deck is that's going to matter. And it's going to be a lot of people guessing what to bring instead of experimenting and bringing something solid to the tournament. And I think that's the latter is much more of what we would like to see out of tournaments. I mean, I'd be super stoked if it was something like the equivalent of this last Battlegrounds event and it was happening 2 days after. That's more interesting, right? Because huge nerfs happen and then 2 days after they have a fun tournament that's maybe not for as much money as this last Brawl tournament was for, but maybe for a decent sum of money, and people get invited to the tournament who are popular streamers and are going to bring wacky stuff, and that's interesting. But your major tournament for large sums of money where people's careers depend, like literal Hearthstone careers depend on being able to accurately test and play and plan for an event, this seems like counter to what we want from something like that.
Yeah.
Like I think there's gonna be a sort of breakup of players where you've got the people who are trying to get on the map that are perhaps going to be much more inclined to be like high risk, high reward. I'm going to try and like find the thing. Maybe they're the ones that'll try like the totem shamans or the Murloc paladins, try the things that like haven't been working that they think maybe could work. Maybe they've got some pet project deck like me working on Stealth Rogue. They're like, let me see how this fits in. But I think the majority of people are going to go for the route of like, okay, what decks survived, right? What decks can I like know are good that didn't suffer too much, right? Take Druid, right? Still probably very good. Fungal Fortunes is worse, but I think like it's still going to be a good tournament bring. Obviously, Warrior survives this as well. So, you know what didn't get hit? Quest Warlock, right? Maybe we're doing some Quest Warlock and teching for aggro if we expect people to be trying to bring those more aggressive decks now that Demon Hunter got hit. I feel like people maybe bring Control Demon Hunter if that was their thing, and if not, they're not bringing Demon Hunter because it's too volatile, right? Too much has changed in Demon Hunter for it to necessarily do that in experimentation. So it's like the more variables there are to work with, I think the more certain players are going to be like, now. I'm not really a deck builder, so I'm going to avoid that class, right?
So for this specific tournament, if I were planning for it, I would say level 1, the deck that is the most powerful with the fewest changes is Enrage Warrior. I am planning on people bringing it. I am bringing a hard target Enrage Warrior lineup, right? Galakron Priest, Big Dumb Druid, some kind of Big Dumb Druid, and I don't know, something else that really beats Warrior. It's mage with a bunch of freeze effects maybe, or something. I don't even know if there's a third deck that consistently beats Warrior. Oh, it's best of 4, it's best of 5. You have to bring 4 decks.
Pure Paladin.
Yeah, pure. It's clearly we're doing that. So we would put that lineup down, and then we would go outside and think for a while. But yeah, you would hard target Warrior, and then you would think, okay, what am I doing if I'm hard targeting the people that are hard targeting Warrior? And that's where your Quest Warlocks come in. That's where maybe your Druid starts to get Malygos in it. That kind of stuff. But outside of the context of the specific tournament, Hearthstone esports needs to consider player quality of life. That is the biggest issue here. You have 2 days to test. Those are not going to be a very pleasant 2 days. You're going to feel really anxious. You're going to be incentivized to play hours and hours and hours a day. It's already kind of a problem with end-of-season ladder resets at 3 in the morning for East Coast players. If you don't stay up, you are actually leaving points on the table. You might not qualify. It is a thing where they've had nerfs in the past, like you talked about Edelweiss, WSOE the day and a half before. It's a third-party tournament, but still, player quality of life was directly negatively impacted. They did change some stuff based on Archivist Elysiana in the original Swiss qualifiers that were 14-hour qualifiers of Control Warrior mirrors, where you would play Elysiana to turn limit multiple times. And I actually cannot think of a worse fate to be subjected to. So they made it single elimination, they nerfed Elysiana, they destroyed Specialist, and now the qualifiers are like, they're not the best experience in the world, but they're going to be close to 7 hours as opposed to 14. Player quality of life matters. And I think that if you don't give the players 7 days in the client before you submit deck lists, you're doing something wrong. So I think that would be something nice for next time. I'm glad they changed stuff. I don't mind the shorter windows. I think 7 days is perfectly fine. 7 days, 9 days. I wouldn't even go over 2 weeks. I think 2 weeks is on the limit of too much time. And having Masters Tours be the showcase of who is the best deck builder as well as who is the best player, who figures stuff out the fastest and makes it the best, is really, really cool. But you don't want too much time, but you really don't want too little time, because that's just not fair to the players. Other things that are coming up, well, TESPA is happening. There's been actually zero coverage of this, but the playoff brackets are happening this weekend. Now, they're not on Twitch. I found out about it from, well, some couple friends that are playing in TESPA, Go Eggo Waffle. So TESPA is happening this weekend, and then hopefully the finals will be cast, but we don't really know a lot about that. The Gold Series Online is going to happen in China. The cool thing about this is that FC Barca, like the Barcelona football club, like European football, has a Hearthstone esports team, and Zim is on it. And I guess that's a thing. So I didn't know that European football clubs had Hearthstone teams, but they do. That's really cool. I hope it's a thing where that is a common intersection. And so the Gold Series Online is going to happen. I don't know how much coverage we'll have of that because it's in China, but I'm hoping that we get some of it. Love really everything that the Gold Series does. And then there's also a new 9-week point-based league format series called Super Girl Gamer Pro. Edelweiss, you in this? You playing?
Yeah. Whoa. Yes, I'm in it, but we don't call things league. Remember, it is a
league format series. You can say league format series. I've gotten clarification
okay.
from Blizzard legal.
Gotcha.
Botticus,
So
I'm not sorry for my actions.
yeah, they're doing a few different types of games. They've got Hearthstone, League of Legends, and Counter-Strike.
Series of Legends.
CS:GO specifically. And yeah, it takes place over a bunch of weeks, where it's basically like you just try and do the best in each event, and you accumulate points over the course of doing all the tournaments. So obviously, if you compete in all of them, you up your chances. This first one, there's only 4 of us, so women, I think non-binary people as well, just like really get in here. It'll be way more interesting to have more people. And yeah, they'll take the top 8 after the 9 weeks, so by which point it'll be September. And there'll be, it says, we'll advance to the championships on October 3rd to 4th in San Diego, California. I think it's debatable whether or not that will be in person, but it'll be cool, I'm sure. However, they end up doing it. And it's totally free to enter. So, and if you do win, they say registration for the tournament and attendance to the championships is completely free, which I think basically means like if you make the top cut, whatever it is, they will fly you out if that's a thing that we're doing in October, which I have serious.
We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
There's opportunity for this event to go online if necessary, so I'm sure that the organizers will put the players' safety at the utmost importance. Also of note, this is being cast by friends of the show Necra Gaming and Dragon Rider DK of Amber Flight Gaming. So really great homegrown community series, and I am putting the link to that in the show notes. Really glad you're in this. Good luck, have fun, you should win. And yeah, sounds... Community grassroots stuff is great. Big fan. Cool. Well, shall we jump into our wind down with Decksplanations?
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's do it.
So, surprise, surprise, Decksplanations this week is meta predictions post nerf, which obviously we discussed some of these things a bit earlier in the news, but we're going to tackle some specific questions. So, yeah, let's kick it off with what decks got nerfed but won't change very much. I don't know which of you would like to chime in on this first.
I'll start.
Go ahead, Hat.
Alright.
You go.
Druid. Warrior. Druid and Warrior. And Highlander Mage. Druid and Warrior, I don't think you actually change how they're built really at all. You might consider cutting the lances, but even then, probably not. Warrior, and Druid, I don't think there is any other reasonable Druid archetype to play, and the deck is still good when you hit your bombs on curve. And then Highlander Mage, Dragoncaster, and DQA are both worse, but the core strategy is still exactly what it was. I think those three decks probably look near identical.
Yeah, I think I agree, except I mean, the more I think about the Druid nerf, the less I think you're going to want to play it. I think that the deck doesn't change. I think that your desire to play it changes.
My desire to play it is
really
already extremely low.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I don't know.
Oh, you mean like the win
I
rate?
think that this, yeah, I think that this is a more significant nerf than it appears on the surface. And I feel like the play pattern for the deck revolved a lot around the Fungal Fortunes cards. So I agree with what Hat was saying earlier about how it doesn't really change the it doesn't really change like the high roll low roll aspect of what the deck really is, which is just either a really big high roll or a really big low roll. But I think that the low rolls happen so much more significantly often that it might end up just not being a deck you're really interested in playing. So we'll see. I don't know, just like I'm thinking about how the turns played out in the 10 games or so that I played it, and it just felt very significant. I think it would make a hugely significant change to not be able to kind of tweak how my turns go with Fungal Fortunes. But other than that, I think that Warrior got a change that it will not really affect a whole lot. But it will lose board more, I guess. That's the biggest thing. So I don't know. I guess, yeah, you're right. Technically, Highlander Mage got changed, but I don't know that you're ever looking for that turn 9 where it was just like everything all up front. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, half of the nerfs were to Demon Hunter, so that changes a lot. But we'll have to see.
Yeah, I would say that. Yeah, honestly, Warrior pretty much the same. Druid, I would like if this pushed us back towards minions, although I feel like the minion thing that's most readily available would be embiggen and strengthen numbers. So maybe I don't like that much. We'll have to see on Druid, but I think for sure Warrior is kind of just like, well, we did it again, and maybe we'll see the skipper nerf eventually, but who's to say when that'll be? So our next question is, what decks got nerfed that either change a lot or go away completely? So in some sense, we're kind of talking about the rest of them, but I think which ones fall into which one of those? Which ones are just going to change? Which ones are going to potentially go away completely?
Is
I mean,
is
the
Rogue in the
clearest
middle?
answer.
Is Rogue in the middle here? Is Rogue between these two? I don't know if it changes that much, but I also don't know if it goes away. But I don't know how I feel about Rogue. I still haven't worked through that.
I don't know. I just feel like I never see it. It's like a unicorn whenever I play against one, and then it either high rolls and beats me. It feels very druid-like, but less
Yeah.
tilting. And it's like if druid just had Ysera portals starting in the deck, and then every couple turns you just got like 3 of them sometimes, and sometimes those portals give you fairy dragons, and sometimes those portals give you Malagoses, and it's just like really frustrating sometimes. But that's also because I'm playing priest, so obviously the games go long, so that happens. And if you're playing demon hunter, that doesn't happen because you just steamroll them. But I don't know. I it's hard to say that it would go away completely when it doesn't feel like it's there in the first place. Whereas, like, this question for me most specifically targets Tempo Demon Hunter and whether that goes away completely or not. And I think it's more likely that it doesn't than it does. But I could definitely see this being enough to just push it out. I could see this being the final straw that breaks it. I don't think it will, but it's not a 0% chance that we just don't see Tempo Demon Hunter anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, we've already seen it go low curve, like further low curve in terms of this iteration with Amanis and the Bone Chewer Brawlers and the Guardian Og Merchants. We also know that low curve with Skull of Gul'dan and other Outcast cards is generally solid. Warglaves was kind of a weird thing in there for your Outcast cards, so maybe now we ditch Warglaves, we cap off at Skull of Gul'dan, and we keep other things low enough that like Altruist becomes decent again. I mean, I suppose it's been decent the whole time, but like it gets, not so much worse because of the twin slice thing, and we actually push a little more face damage with it, which I don't know that's.
I
great,
was hoping
but,
that Altruist did more face damage. Every time I play against an Altruist, I'm like, gee, I don't think that card does
look,
enough face damage.
I'm just saying. But like it balances out if the Warglaves aren't doing that face damage. I think where we are, like where we have been, Warglaves was doing way more face damage than Altruist was doing. So I could see a world where Demon Hunter is like, cool, so we lose Warglaves, we lose our like huge mid-game power swing. Maybe we instead want to dominate early even more. And I don't know, put in maybe some additional neutrals in there. Maybe we go back to running double of the 2 mana draw 2, right?
Yeah, and we could go to a Blade Dance build. We could put in Aldrachi Warblades and Blade Dance if we're going for just board control. Now that doesn't do damage, and the deck gets significantly worse at doing a lot of damage. But also, it's hard to ever imagine Demon Hunter cards not being good enough to see play, even after they've changed 13 of them. And it's 13 class cards that have been changed. But I agree it'll be completely different. I'd be surprised if it went away. If Rogue went away, I don't know if I'd be surprised, but I'm not ready to bet on it, is where I've landed there. If Demon Hunter went away, I would be shocked. It'll be different, but if it went away in an aggressive build, I would be shocked. I'd be very, very surprised.
What I'm really curious about is, so, okay, Warglaive 6 now. Control Demon Hunter. Where's that line between, like, Flame, the 7 cost weapon, and the Warglaives? Right? Because, like...
Well, Flame Rip is a board control tool, and Warglaives is 12 to the face. I guess they're both 12 to the face, but...
Right.
Yeah. Warglaives it's
but
kind
also,
of both.
Also, people aren't going wide, which is what that card is for, right? And with as long as Risky Skipper exists, then people are not going to go wide, and if
Yeah.
people aren't going to go wide, then you're not going to play that card. But if Risky Skipper gets nerfed and people start figuring out zoo type strategies, maybe that line gets a lot closer.
And I guess that segues us pretty nicely into the next question.
Yeah. So, what is going to improve most relative to the rest of the field? And I think, I don't know. For me, it's aggro decks, right? It's decks that were pushed down by Warglaives, at least in tournaments. Sorry, at least in tournaments, where we can say ban Warrior. I don't want to see Skipper. Aggro decks get a lot better because, like, you couldn't ban both Warrior and Demon Hunter, but now we can at least just like still ban the Warrior and kind of go under things like Druid and Mage and that kind of stuff potentially. I don't know. I think that something like Totem Shaman, certain things with these like really explosive starts, Murloc Paladin sometimes just gets you. I think people are going to try a lot more of that stuff, with Demon Hunter just being significantly slowed down.
So your perspective from a tournament is decks that ban Warrior or target Warrior get better because the other decks that are not Warrior are worse, and that makes sense.
Right.
From a ladder perspective, since you can't ban Warrior, decks that are good against Warrior that were bad against Demon Hunter get better. Priest. All priests.
See, it's interesting to me because I guess I see that, but I'm wondering, like, if there's a significant decrease in tempo Demon Hunter, then doesn't Highlander Hunter and Totem Shaman and these cards that really beat up on Priest get significantly better as well? I feel like Tempo Demon Hunter was holding back a lot of the decks that really kind of beat up on Priest, and I think I feel like people are going to expect Priest to get a lot better because it literally did not get touched and it was already kind of on the cusp of being good. So, and people are getting rank 1 with it even with no changes. So I'm worried that there's going to be an outcropping of people that really don't like Priest, which is a large portion of the community, and we're going to see a lot of decks out there that they're thinking that Demon Hunter is going to be significantly worse, and it probably is relatively worse. And we're going to see the decks that really beat up on Priest. So I don't know. I would not be surprised if these changes happen and people try Priest and it's not going to be working because people are going to be doing other stuff that really beat up on it. But we'll see.
I can see that.
But I think.
Go ahead.
Oh, so yeah, I was just gonna say, like, you mentioned that some of the aggro things kind of beat up on Priest, but like Priest has been evolving all this time. Like the recent rank 1 lists have been at least inspired not by, if not actually, the the no hands list and like the Mana Saber version. So I think that like my teammate Garrett has an insane win rate against even Demon Hunter with that list because of the modifications with like the dormant cards and the stealth. So I actually kind of wonder, like, it's sort of hard to say what Priest's like good and bad matchups are right now because you have to sort of specify whether you're doing like the thought steal stuff or the more tempo kind of stuff because it does flip around some of those matchups.
I wonder, are people still thought stealing a lot? I feel like, I don't know. I'm struggling to find reason that you want to be thought stealing anymore. Just having played the deck enough, when you have a Galakron in play, you just can't really afford to do stuff like thought stealing. And now that you just have all this other stuff that you're essentially throwing away to either get a board presence that wins the game with your buff cards, or you grind them out with a Galakron. I just don't know that this other kind of grindy card, which is Thought Steal, needs to be a part of the deck anymore. So I don't know. I feel like it's going to be a fairly hostile to Priest meta coming up. I just have a feeling, and whether that's because priest is good enough to be hostile against, or if people are hostile against it because they don't want to be playing priest mirrors, which I think is also a valid opinion to have, then yeah, I like priest where it's at right now, where it's a small portion of the meta that can still compete, but I don't think I want to play in a meta where 20% of the decks are priest. Or is that a super high number? Even like,
If 1 out of 5 people were playing priest, that would feel like a high number. Yeah,
I feel like a lot.
yeah.
And I feel like
that's too
it feels higher being priest, just because priests tend to be value oriented now that we have lost its combo. So I feel like that can kind of bring us into what does the meta look like day one. And I wonder if, kind of like you were saying, Bot, maybe people expect, oh, hey, priest didn't see any nerfs. We could see like a lot of priests and a lot of warriors. And then to counter that, people are like, all right, well, what just trashes priest? And there's going to be a lot of that back and forth, I imagine.
Well, and the cycle that we've seen since the beginning of Ashes of Outland will happen. Demon Hunter will come out. It'll be really good. They'll nerf it. Oh, Highlander Hunter gets a lot better because it was countered by Demon Hunter. Oh, wait, other decks are getting refined. They can kind of keep up with Highlander Hunter. Oh, wait, Demon Hunter's still good. Okay, I can't play Highlander Hunter anymore. Oh, wait, they nerfed Demon Hunter. And the cycle begins anew. And that'll happen again, because Highlander Hunter trashes Priest. Destroys Priest. Really, really good against Priest. So, day one, Highlander Hunter will be a big part of the ladder. Day one, Priest will be a big part of the ladder, and I expect to see a lot of Warriors. Beyond that, what it'll look like the next couple days, I'm not sure, but I think we can consistently say those 3 decks will see a lot of representation. And the Warriors might shift a little bit. You might see more Brawls. You might see more Control Warriors. Because you also will have a bunch of people that say, I don't have to worry about Demon Hunter anymore, but I don't want to lose to Druid. And Priest is the deck you play if you don't want to lose to Druid. At least Control, the Galakron version, the split version, I think is a little bit sketchier against Druid.
Oh.
I would
Nah,
disagree. I think it's
I
the
like me with
exact
the mind
opposite.
games.
You think it's better?
Yeah, I agreed. Because
I
the
think
tempo
playing
priest-
minions against druid is good.
Okay, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Now, if like it matters obviously how insane their draw is. Like if they get a Breath of Dreams Overgrowth, that's just going to be hard.
That's
to
not
deal
standard. That's Tavern Brawl. We don't count that.
Right. So, I think the big things are like if you're running mind games, that's an always keep, and if you're not going to die, play it against Druid. But besides that, yeah, doing things like coin Mana Saber into Grave Rune into Don't Attack and then Psych Split.
Yeah, that's pretty juicy.
That does really well.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there. And people won't want to lose to Druid, and Priest is good against Druid in general. I would expect to see a lot of those day one, and I don't expect that to continue to be part of the meta, because when someone figures out Demon Hunter, probably about 12 to 18 hours in, or maybe we'll get the list from the Masters Tour because people won't post it 2 days later, then the meta will change dramatically again. But that first day, if we're sticking with what people know, which they will probably play this late in the expansion, Priest, Warrior, Highlander Hunter, probably Druid. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't have a good answer to this question. What I will say is my hope, I guess my worry about this is that I think while all these nerfs might make grand changes to the meta and what it looks like, I'm worried that it won't change the necessary play patterns that will make the format interesting. I'm worried that we're going to be playing the same decks with worse cards, and it's not going to feel different, and it's not going to feel rejuvenating, and that's what I'm more worried about than what decks are good. I think that if people are just playing the same decks and they're worse, it's not going to feel like a different meta, and it's not going to be more fun to play. And that's what I want nerfs to be. I want nerfs to change the format in a way that it feels different instead of feels worse isn't the right word. It feels less powerful.
Clunkier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm worried about day one. And yeah, I guess, I mean, there's one more question which also have an answer to. But what are your did you already kind of express your opinions on what you think day one's going to look like, Edelweiss?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think I mentioned it at the beginning that like
Okay.
it'll probably be a lot of the stuff that didn't get changed too much, and then people trying to counter that. And the main thing we talked about was priest. So, but yeah, that leads into what do you want to play on day one? Why? Why don't you kick us off, Hat?
What do I want to play day one? Something goofy and interesting. I want to play. I might play minionless mage. I might play spell mage. Might rock some of that. Because
Play that against that twice.
it's not bad. APX Void was actually
Weird.
playing it. I want to play that. I will consider playing Recurring Villain Paladin and Totem Shaman just because I want to play them. But I don't think that either of those are where I'll end up. I expect actually day one I will be trying rogue cards as well. I would be very surprised if I wasn't playing rogue because of who I am as a person, but also because I want to see how that situation is, what's going on with rogue. But yeah, I think if I were picking a deck that might actually benefit directly from this, it might be Spell Mage. It might be No Minion Mage. Yeah, I want to try it.
That's a reasonable answer. If I'm gonna be 100% honest, and yes, I do a Hearthstone podcast, and this feels bad, but I think I will be playing Path of Exile on day one of the nerfs. I think I'm going to wait and see where the meta goes, and then decide on what to play from there. I think the playing on day one, if I try to jam Priest, I feel like I'm going to get frustrated. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'll play a few games, but I don't think I'm so interested on the day one meta. I'm more interested to see where it goes and what decks are viable from there, and figure out what I want to play after that.
That answer is somehow the most accurate and the most upsetting that you could have given.
I can respect it though. I can, he's.
I'm not gonna. I don't want to lie to the listeners. I don't want to be like, yeah, I'm gonna play so much Hearthstone
We
when
can't
the nerfs
all
come
be
out.
Alexander Hamilton. Some of us have to be Aaron Burr and wait for it. Just.
Did you hear the first act of Hamilton done entirely by Muppets?
Wait, what?
First hour of Hamilton sung
Okay,
entirely by the Muppets. I'll send you a link. It's fine.
Yeah, well, I
We'll
do,
talk after the
'cause
show.
I definitely want to check that out later. For me, I am probably going to take this opportunity to play Demon Hunter when no one else is going to want to play Demon Hunter, because I have this disease, which is like being a hipster, with my deck list. So I've like avoided Demon Hunter for a very long time because people have been all about Demon Hunter, and yeah, if there's not going to be too many people playing it, maybe it's my chance to play Demon Hunter and figure out something really low to the ground. Maybe I'll do something super draw heavy so we can run Zephyrus in our aggro deck. Just double Volpera it up. I don't know. We'll see.
I was wrong. That answer was more upsetting. Yeah, I was wrong.
We live to disappoint you, Hat.
That's really sad. That can't be
kidding.
true.
I don't know.
Okay.
It's not true. I don't know. I was making a bad joke.
The other thing I'm excited to do is jam some Totem Shaman and Libram Paladin, which I don't do Ike's version. I do a version with Exotic Mount Seller, which I am blanking on his name, but one of the
Sharon.
Latin American players.
No, Sharon, the French player, right?
Well, I found my list like a month or so back from a Latin American player, but
Huh.
can't remember his name.
I wonder if Race was playing that.
yeah.
I feel like he was, but
Maybe he was, but I would have remembered if it was Race because I've used Race's list before.
We'll figure it
in
out.
Copa
Doesn't-
America, I played with his decks. But anyway, I've since made modifications. I like Mount Seller. I like the 4/4 mana 3/3 that copies one of the adjacent minions, which you can use to multiply your Librams of Wisdom. Replicatotron, I believe it's called. That's pretty great. and I've used, instead of questing adventurer, I use the ooze guy. Which-
Blistering Rot. The 3-mana
Blistering
1/2
Rot.
that at the end of the turn it summons a minion with a copy of this one's stats.
Which I love that minion because it has this unique thing where, so it, you don't go tall the way you do with QA, but the minion that it summons can't lose stats from being silenced. So if you make like a 4/5 Blistering Rot and it summons a 4/5, that's just a 4/5. They can silence the Blistering Rot. They can, they prioritize killing the Blistering Rot because otherwise it'll summon more stuff. But any of the stuff it summons just has those stats and won't be silenced. And I think that's pretty unique among the summon a copy type thing minions that we've seen before.
You're at the dealership,
So
and the dealer's making the hard sell. If you buy this 3-mana 1/2 and you put 3 Librams on it, we'll throw in the Shieldwind Yeti absolutely free of charge. And Edelweiss is like, I will pay sticker price. That's what's going on there. Well, I hope you enjoy your free Shieldwind Yetis on day 1. That sounds really fun. Actually,
Yeah.
send me a list. And also I have a list
do.
from Bach for Life, who was in my stream earlier, with a spell damage shaman, where you Og Merchant your Arcane Watcher. I'll send it to you.
Spell damage Og Merchant,
Yes,
I presume.
correct.
Okay.
And then you
We
get in
forget
for 5.
that there's those as well.
Yes, there are multiple, but sometimes you just got to get them. And that'll wind down our show for the week, but we've got many people we'd like to thank. Check out our thanks section on the website at CoinConcede.com, where you can find our contact info, our show notes, and our Patreon information. You can monetarily support our show at patreon.com/CoinConcede, every week live, by following us on Twitch, twitch.coinconcede.com. Join our community chats live in our Discord at discord.coinconcede.com, right into our email at coinconcede@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter at CoinConcede, like, share, and follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/CoinConcede. Like some CC swag, head over to our shop at shop.coinconcede.com. Big thanks to our producers, Number Theory, Itinerant Wizard, Tony S., DogeTK, and Karhu, and huge thanks to all of you listeners that are here in the live chat. 2.5 hours. It has been a minute, and the shows are going to stay long because we have new expansion coming. But why don't we start? Edelweiss, you're our guest. Thank you so much for being here. Who would you like to coin concede to today?
So for me, it's going to be Cora, Alec Dawson, and Liv Breeden. They've all been amazing throughout the application process in terms of answering my questions, both about sort of design questions and also just Blizzard, like working for Blizzard generally. Can't thank them enough. They've been extremely helpful and really considerate, gone out of their way to do things that a lot of companies would not bother to do. HS Deck Tech for helping me out in terms of I talked to him before, when I just gotten through the first phase, and he helped me out a little bit on some of the what to expect. And then Casual R / Solian, who actually is a friend of mine from college. For some reason, his Twitch and Discord names are different. But we're going to be working on some stuff together, and really, really excited to begin those projects. And finally, Lorinda has been great in terms of providing data for some tournament decisions I'm trying to make going forward. So really appreciate all the work he does in terms of compiling data for the Masters tours as we've seen. So yeah.
Yeah, Lorinda's awesome. What about you, Botticus?
I'm gonna coin concede to Mana Saber because that card is sweet. Oh man, I won so many games with that card. It did so. Oh man, against Demon Hunter, I don't know that there's a better feeling than playing a Mana Saber and then just not attacking with it for like 8 turns in a row because you have complete control of the board, and then as soon as you need to, you just have it available to kill their stuff with it. That card is so good in that matchup.
Is it like
I'm
is
sorry
that is that the best minion in the Demon Hunter matchup? Like it's by pretty far, right?
Imprisoned Vile Fiend
Okay.
is better by a pretty decent margin, I think. But I don't know. All of the cards that let you attack Demon Hunter's stuff are really good. Any of those ones.
That makes sense.
I like those ones.
I was just wondering if Mana Saber was in a different category.
if you don't kick me off the show, I might quit.
Yeah,
Kidding. I would never do that.
I appreciate your tolerance for pain. So I'd like to coin concede as well to quite a few people. The Angry Chicken, of course, was on that show. Great experience. Garrett and Josh were very gracious hosts. Had a lot of fun over there. Check them out at amove.tv. Coin concede to Arena Sensei. They had an episode that said "Don't fight for board control," and it was about initiative and not board control, and I loved it a lot. Coin concede to Enthralamund for making the amazing hat smork emote, which you can find in my Twitch chat. It is the smork orc wearing my logo hat, and I love it so much, and it's amazing, and he's amazing. And he also coaches, and he's very good at Priest and Warrior, so check him out on the coaching forum. I am Megatron, really nice fella that stops in my stream the other day. Just big props to him. You Sunk My Hattleship, my THL team. We won the Wild Series. It's me and one of the other players is named A2 Battleship, so You Sunk My Hattleship. It seemed like it made sense. And we were unsinkable. We went 10-0 on the season, narrowly defeating the Wild THL Fanatics in the finals with some names you may know: Electric Sheep City, Mike Lowe, and Dr. Bomb D. Very, very tough competition. It came down to 9 points versus 8 points. Every single game was amazing. So great opponents. My first THL championship, despite being in the series for years since Ungoro came out. I don't want to think about how long that's been. And also, finally, big coin concede to Zuiderman HS, Zuider. Is that Zui or Zoo? I don't know if it's a silent I. I'm asking rhetorically. Zuiderman HS raised a good point that I wanted to share here as well. It would be really, really great if Blizzard could have an in-Hearthstone chat report function. And Zuiderman is asking some of the content creators to signal boost that. I think it would be a great thing for the game that if you're in the Hearthstone client and someone says some stuff that's not great, which happens an unfortunate amount in friendly matches, there should be a way to report that without leaving the client. So really hope they add that. I think it'd be a lovely feature, very important for making the game a little bit more accessible and a little bit more broad. So, Sweeterman, thank you for bringing that up. That's going to do our show. Keep calm and pay mana for your cards, at least one, unless it's Libram of Wisdom. And if you see us on ladder, coin concede.
Coin concede.
Coin concede.
Very well. The day is short.
Add that in post. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in, and we will see you next time.